Ever since I was a little girl, I had received many praises for my voice. People would often call it angelic, blessed, and many other pleasant things whenever they hear me speak or sing. You know how mothers usually sing a lullaby to their children? But my case was different. I was the one who used to sing before we slept. This is not an exaggeration, since my mom had insomnia. The only thing that could make her fall asleep was my singing, whether I sing a nursery rhyme, poem, or song. She often said God gifted me to her to cure her sleeping problems, and I also felt happy singing for her. When I reached the age of 11, my mom passed away in a car crash, and Dad raised me alone after that. He was a good father who always put my needs before his own, and I wanted to do something nice for him once I grew up. I often saw him silently staring at Mom's picture alone in his room. Sometimes there were tears in his eyes, but I never once saw him letting it fall. Some people used to say that the only thing I have is the voice I was born with, and I have no talent except that, which made me feel a bit sad, since it was true. But it was not like I started hating my voice because of their opinion or something. My mom used to tell me that it was ethereal, and she made me love it. So how could I ever dislike my voice just because someone felt insecure about it? Even then, my school life didn't have much difficulty, despite being the girl who didn't talk much. Students and teachers were always nice to me, which made me feel at ease. Well, whether people acknowledge it or not, I did have the talent to copy a song to however it was sung by the original singer. I could copy the high notes, low notes, pitch, rhythm, everything just by listening to it once. That was the reason whenever there was a singing competition, show, or anything that included using voice, teachers would encourage me to do it. People started saying that I should go to the US talent show, America's Got Talent, and show off my otherworldly voice. While their compliments made me feel good, I never thought of actually entering the talent show because I always thought the people were just being generous with their praises. So I never took them seriously. After graduating from high school, I chose psychology in college since I always had an interest in that, and the more I indulged in the subject, the more I found myself drawn toward it. I never thought about what I would do after my master's in psychology, but I did start to learn magic tricks through it. Not that I was thinking of becoming a magician. Now that I'm thinking about it, a psychotherapist might be a good choice. Anyway, I never moved out of the house since it was clear from my dad's condition that he never moved on from Mom's death. He never dated any woman despite being so handsome, and leaving him alone in his misery was not something I could do, so I decided to take care of him. I joined a part-time job at a department store to bring some extra income home apart from Dad's earnings. It was a different case that I did not want him to work anymore, looking at his health falling gradually. But since I knew it would hurt his self-esteem, I never said anything. As his health started to decline more and more, my fear and anxiousness of losing him started to grow. So I decided to do something. I wanted to help him, but I didn't know how. That was when I remembered all those compliments about going to America's Got Talent. So I started participating in competitions and talent shows to get an idea of how these competitions work. I was pretty naive back then, so whatever others used to tell me, I would foolishly believe. And since I had no idea how to get into America's Got Talent, I asked around about it. That was when I met a man who told me that he had some connections there, which would help me go through auditions and other procedures smoothly. He also exchanged numbers with me, and since he seemed nice and sweet, I decided to trust his words. I didn't tell Dad about any of this yet, and wanted to surprise him after I get selected, so I started practicing secretly. Then, one day, I got a call from that man, let's call him Jared, telling me that I needed to meet him the next day for a pre-audition process or something, and the way he explained all the details about it convinced me that it must be a real thing. He came to pick me up the next day, and as I was entering his car, my heart was nervously racing, and I started to question if I was not ready yet. Nonetheless, I was still going to do it. He asked me to sit in the front seat beside him, and while lost in my thoughts, I followed his command like a robot. I don't know why I couldn't pick any red flags from him until he started driving, when it was all too obvious. The glances he was stealing from my body were the first thing I noticed, as it was making me feel uneasy. But even at that time, I was thinking it would be rude of him if I asked him to stop that. But when he stopped the car on an empty road, I flinched with perturbation. He then turned to me and gave me a look that resembled those hungry wolves I saw in wildlife documentaries. It was far worse than that. Maintaining eye contact, he leaned on me while I trembled with foreboding. The moment he extended his hand and gripped the hem of my dress, I rummaged my inner courage and pushed him away with all my might. Before he could react, I opened the car door and started running as fast as I could. I thought he would follow me, but luckily he didn't. But still, I was scared, so I ran inside the nearest store I could find. Not knowing what else to do, I called the only person I knew I was safe with, my dad. The moment he had call, I started crying without being able to speak a word, and the part-timer working there was smart enough to take the phone from my hand to ask him to pick me up. After explaining the address, she gave me my phone back and even offered me some tissue with a glass of water. I never told her what happened to me, nor did she ask. But she still somehow understood that whatever it was, I needed her help. Since there weren't many customers at the store to begin with, she continued consoling me till Dad got there. Before going with Dad, I thanked her for everything she did, since she was one of the kindest human beings I ever met. Looking at my trembling body and puffy eyes, he got worried and asked me about what happened. I started telling him everything as he continued driving home with a determination in my mind that I was never going to hide anything from him anymore.
In the late fall of 2017, I had just moved back to my hometown of Las Vegas after spending a year teaching set design at UT Austin. It had been a very rewarding experience, but it hadn't left much time for socializing, so by the time I got back home to Vegas, it had been exactly 26 months since I'd so much as held a guy's hand. I was fine not dating in Austin. It was a temporary stay, and I quite literally had a job to do, so aside from a few casual flirtations, I remained professional and stayed focused on my work. But then, not long after getting back to Vegas, I started to feel the pangs of loneliness setting in, and once I mentioned that to a friend of mine, she recommended that I download Tinder. I downloaded the app, made myself a profile, and within just a few days, had a date lined up with a guy I actually really liked, a guy that we'll call Mark. He seemed to occupy that happy medium between hot and nerdy, and since he was the perfect gentleman on our first date, he made it very easy to accept his invitation to a second date. One thing led to another, and we ended up dating for a couple of months. Then when the time seemed right, he asked me to be his girlfriend, and I happily accepted. On the surface, this might all seem totally normal, right? Girl meets boy, girl dates boy, girl becomes girlfriend. Like, where's the weird creepy part? Well, by that 10-week mark, when he asked me to be his girlfriend, Mark and I had kissed a grand total of about 5 or 6 times. There had been no making out, no heavy petting, and most certainly no sleeping together. I just thought that he was being very gentlemanly at first, and I've never been great at asking to be intimate, so to me, it seemed like when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. neither of us was going to budge, and in the end, it was me that brought it up first. It was the same weekend he asked me to be his girlfriend when I decided to bring up the possibility of us being intimate together in the near future. I communicated to him that it was something that I wanted, and made sure that it was something he wanted too. Then, when I asked if there was anything he'd like me to do, he seemed to think for a moment, and then hesitated when he tried to speak his mind. I asked him to finish the thought and made it clear that he was in a safe space that was completely judgment-free. He once again attempted to communicate with me, but seemed to fall at the final hurdle without actually airing his thoughts. I recognized that, whatever it was evidently something that he wasn't 100% comfortable talking about. But I also thought that he'd open up a bit more and act in the heat of the moment once we'd finally made it to the bedroom. But then, we didn't make it to the bedroom, and by then I was starting to believe that he was deliberately avoiding any kind of physical intimacy. Obviously, this bothered me quite a bit. I liked him and I wanted him to like me, but then if we weren't sleeping together, that was probably going to be an issue. Another week or two went by before I sat Mark down and told him we needed to talk. Once again, I brought up the issue of us being intimate, and once again, he might as well have just turned to stone. He seemed either unwilling or unable to voice his needs to me, and it took another round of gentle encouragement to even try. But then finally, after what seemed like an eternity, he told me what he wanted. And what he wanted was for me to dress up for him. Now, before I tell you what Mark wanted me to dress up as, there's something you need to know about me. And honestly, I think a lot of you will probably put two and two together by the time I'm finished explaining. I've always looked a lot younger than I really am. I guess I hit 16 and just kind of stopped growing. It's not just that I'm short either, and at 4'11" I am very short. I have a baby face too, maybe the mother of all baby faces, meaning that although I was in my late 20s at the time I was dating Mark, I could have probably passed for a high school freshman on a no-makeup gym day. It was a real problem around the time that I started drinking, but then the older I got, the more it worked to my advantage. Looking 14 at 21 honestly sucked, but looking 21 at 30, there was worse things to deal with, I guess. But then that second time, I sat down with Mark and finally got him to confess that he wanted to dress me up. I realized that there was another downside to looking as young as I did, one that was unforeseen and unencountered right up until that moment. Mark told me that he wanted me to dress up for him, and at first, I figured he wanted me to dress as something cute, or maybe even one of the cosplays that I'd shown him pictures of. But Mark didn't want that. He wanted something different. And when, at long last, the words finally left his lips, I was so horrified that I must have visibly pulled back. Mark said he wanted me to dress young, very young. And when I asked him what exactly he meant by that, he told me how, before we slept together, he wanted me to dress up like a little girl. Those were the words he used. But what I heard, because let's be honest, this is what he was really asking me, was that he wanted me to dress up as a child. And I was stunned. I thought he was going to ask me, I don't know, wear stockings or go blindfolded or something. So, when he finally told me what he wanted, and it was that, I felt sick to my stomach. I didn't know what to say, so I just didn't say anything, and my silence prompted Mark to backpedal as he tried to explain away what he just said to me. He knew it was wrong. He knew it was ugly, and that's why it had taken him so long to say it. But I think without a doubt the worst thing was realizing why he'd chosen me as his prospective girlfriend. Me, who looked no older than 17 on a gym day, like I said, and me, who looked so young that I had to dress ultra-professional to be taken remotely seriously at work, even though on any given day I could be the most experienced person working on a set. That was one of the huge downsides to being blessed with such youthful looks, one I really hated. Just not nearly as much as I hated realizing that there was another downside too. That creeps like Mark were going to want to use me to satisfy some unspeakable urge. I walked out of Mark's apartment not long after telling me that he wanted me to dress up as a child in the bedroom for him. He kept trying to call me as I made my way home, and I remember just putting my phone on airplane mode, feeling like I couldn't even see his name without wanting to throw up. Once I was home and I gathered my thoughts, I sent him a text saying that I was deleting his number and that he should lose mine too. Any further attempts to reach out to me would be considered unwanted harassment, and I'd be making a note of them prior to filing a police report. And after that, his calls and texts suddenly stopped, and I'm thankful to have never heard from him again. I wish I could tell you that I never allowed Mark a single second of thought time from there on out, but as you can tell, that's not true at all. I've actually thought about him quite a bit, and I've told this story to quite a few people. I guess it's because whenever the subject of child abuse or exploitation comes up, either in a movie or on the news or a TV show, I can't help but think of Mark. Part of me hopes that he's gone to therapy or something, anything to help him deal with the disgusting desire that he confessed to me that night. But another part of me thinks it's just a matter of time before I see Mark's face in the news, having been arrested for one of the worst crimes I could possibly conceive of.
While working as a delivery guy for a jewelry brand, I had the pleasure of delivering jewelry to a regular customer every week for over 2 months. As I interacted with her every week, I began to learn more about her personal life. It turned out she was using the jewelry as a way to cope with her husband's neglect, which had been affecting her for quite some time. As I arrived to make a delivery, I pressed the doorbell, but there was no answer. I waited for a few minutes and pressed the bell again, but there was still no response. The jewelry that I was delivering was quite valuable, and leaving outside was not an option. I pondered for a moment and decided to come back later and try again. I carefully picked up the package and headed back to my delivery van. As the sun began to set, I made my way back to the house and rang the doorbell once again, but to no avail. I stood there for a few moments, listening intently, but there was no sound, not even a faint rustling or creaking. The house appeared dark and lifeless, except for a flicker of light that could be seen through the window on the second floor. The air was heavy and still. There was a strong metallic scent that made me feel uneasy. It was as if the house was holding its breath, and I couldn't help but feel that something was terribly wrong. I hesitated to disturb the eerie silence, fearing what I might find inside, but my curiosity got the better of me. I used the trick when I worked as a mechanic to open the door to check. As I turned the doorknob and pushed the door open, I stepped into the dimly lit room. My eyes took a moment to adjust to the low light, and as I walked a few steps further, I was startled to see the woman laying motionless in a pool of blood. My heart racing, I hesitated for a moment before slowly approaching her. I knelt down beside her and gently placed 2 fingers on her wrist, searching for a pulse. With bated breath, I waited for a few seconds, but it was of no use. There was no pulse. I acted fast and grabbed my phone to dial 911. The operator on the other side of the line instructed me to stay put and wait for the police to arrive. I anxiously waited, hoping that the authorities would show up soon. After about 20 minutes or so, the police finally arrived and started questioning me about the situation. They seemed suspicious as to why I was inside the house if I was just there to deliver a package. I explained to them that I was concerned about the well-being of the kind lady who lived there, and that was the reason why I decided to break in and check on her. Despite my attempts to clear my name, the police still held suspicions towards me. However, their focus shifted to her husband, who had suddenly become unresponsive to their calls and was nowhere to be found at his workplace. This new development in the investigation only added to the mystery surrounding the murder. After a few days, I received a call from the investigators once again. They had more questions about the woman and wanted me to share everything I knew about her. I was an honest person and had nothing to hide, so I provided with them all the details that I could recall. Since I remembered that the day I went to deliver the jewelry to the woman, there were some kids playing in the parking lot who had seen me. I made sure to mention this to the investigators so they don't suspect me anymore. As time passed by, I found myself sitting in front of the television watching the news. It was just another ordinary day until a particular news story about a young woman who had gone missing caught my attention. I couldn't help but notice that her appearance was strikingly similar to that of the woman who was murdered. I couldn't shake off the feeling that something wasn't right, so I decided to take action. I quickly contacted the investigators and shared my doubts with them. The investigators were grateful for the information and acted on it immediately. That very evening, they caught the woman's husband, and it turned out that he was the culprit all along. It was a shocking revelation, and I couldn't help but feel relieved that I had spoken up and done my part in helping to solve the case. He revealed that he hated his wife along and didn't want to marry her in the first place. The only reason he did was because of her pregnancy, which was unexpected. But after marriage, she miscarried, which made him furious. When he asked for a divorce, she refused, so he started ignoring her. But that day, when they were arguing, he lost control and ended up killing her. When he was asked if he kidnapped the other girl who resembled his wife, he stayed silent. He neither accepted it nor denied it. Detectives tried everything in their power to find out that girl's whereabouts, but were of no use. Since he kept his mouth shut and there was no evidence against him regarding the girl's disappearance, they couldn't punish him for that. But he was sentenced to life for murdering his wife. I don't know about others, but I have a theory. I'm convinced that it was indeed him who killed the girl who resembled his wife, and it must be either because he was terrified about the crime and lost his mind when he misunderstood the girl for his wife, or he was so furious that he just wanted to kill the woman again, and when he saw the girl, he couldn't help himself.
A bunch of years ago, I matched with a guy on Tinder. I was a freshman in college and just got out of a relationship and was having fun. I matched with this guy. He was 24. We'll call him D. He was a little odd, but we had similar interests and went to the same school, so I thought, why not? The red flag started rolling in immediately when I said I would go on a date with him. Of course, the fact that he was much older isn't lost on me as the initial red flag. At this time, I didn't have a car. D offers to pick me up, but tells me that he's not in town, but he would leave his grandmother's funeral early, which was at a minimum 5 hours away, to come and pick me up. He showed up in sweatpants, a wife beater, and flip-flops, which struck me as odd because he said that he was coming from a funeral. We had made plans just to get a bite to eat and hang out. Since he had been out of town, he asked if it was okay if we stopped by to pick up his dog. He left the dog with a friend. I like dogs, so I was like, no problem. It's dark and we pull up to an apartment complex and he leaves me in the car and comes back with a golden retriever. The dog immediately starts growling at me, which has never happened to me before, so I start feeling a little weird. D doesn't say anything about the dog's temperament. Because we have the dog, he wants to drop him off at his house, and this feels logical to me, so I agree. When we pull up to D's house, he asks if I want to come in, not wanting to sit in the car, and I do. The moment I walked in, I immediately knew that it was the wrong choice. The house was trashed. There's garbage everywhere, trash bags full along the front entry, bottles and wrappers on the couch, and just general crap everywhere. D lets me know that he has a roommate, but that roommate isn't home. I assume this is to imply that the mess isn't his. After brushing the trash off the couch, he asks if I want to sit and play chess. I had expressed that I was interested in learning, and he seemed more than happy to help me learn, and this too was a mistake. D begins explaining the game to me, and it isn't just fun first date explaining. He's gotten very serious and is showing me each piece while telling me what it is and what it does and how it moves. D then begins questioning me over each piece, which I mostly get wrong, and every time I get one wrong, he yells at me the correct answer and tells me to try again. He got more and more frustrated, and it made me very uncomfortable, so I suggested that we just pause chess and do something else. D suggests watching a movie, which is fine with me. The idea of us leaving and going to get food was seemingly forgotten. D tells me that we can watch a movie in his room and I oblige, but then he explains that he has to put clean sheets on the bed. I'd assumed that we were moving to his bedroom because it may have been cleaner, but when we go in, it's not, and there is no TV in his room. He proceeds to put on Iron Man 2 on his phone to have us watch, and we watched about 10 minutes of it before things got intimate. I won't tell you strangers all these details, but short story short, we didn't actually go through with it, but other little things went down. I will say those things were consensual, and after they occurred, I was feeling really odd about the whole situation and told him I didn't want to go any further than that. D was confused but didn't push it at first. He said fine, and we watched maybe 5 more minutes of the movie before he said that he didn't want to watch the movie anymore. He started complaining and asking me why I didn't want to do things with him, and I simply said that I wasn't in the mood anymore. He then began pressuring me to tell him exactly what it was about him that made me feel that way. And at this point, we had moved from the bedroom back into the dirty living room, and you might be thinking, seems like a perfect time to leave. And I thought so too, but this is where things start to get scary. As if he knows I'm thinking about how I'm leaving, he explodes and begins to scream at me. This is a 6-foot-something man screaming in the face of a 5-foot-nothing young girl. Of course, I'm internally freaking out, but I'm trying to make sure that I don't make him any more angry, but also not agreeing to anything. For the next 5 to 10 minutes, D screams at me about why I don't like him, why I don't want him, and continuously asks what's wrong with him and to tell him. I tried to placate him as best as possible, saying the old, "It's not you, it's me," and "No, I don't want to leave." Again, this man is my only ride home, and I'm truthfully not sure exactly where I was. Though I did have my phone and Google Maps, I didn't have Uber downloaded at the time. D finally calms down when he believes I'm going to stay, then suggests we try playing some video games. I was in full internal freakout mode, trying to make sure that I was playing the part of the interested date because I was terrified that if he felt that I wanted to leave, he would freak out again. We played this game for a while. I forget what it's called, Overwatch or something, and D starts getting upset again. He starts yelling about why no one likes him and why no one wants to get to know him and why no one loves him, saying that he has never had a girlfriend and all his dates had been just one-night stands. Again, I placate him with I don't know, lots of girls are just snooty like that. And at this point, I'm saying anything and everything he wants to hear. He even starts crying about how his mother never loved him and telling me very deep, dark things about what his mother has said to him and treated him like. After he finally calms down once more, he gets up and goes to the kitchen to fix us some drinks. Now, if you're anyone with a brain, you're thinking absolutely not, which was my exact thought at that moment. I decline his multiple offers for a drink, and he asks instead of alcohol if I wanted water, and of course I declined that too, feigning that I wasn't thirsty. I stayed at his apartment until about 1 a.m. because I was sitting next to him, terrified to 1, ask him to take me home, 2, say I'd walk home, or 3, figure out how to get an Uber. I've been trying to download Uber on my phone without him noticing, but then it asked for card information, and that was too hard to do without him noticing. So around 1 a.m., I yawn very loudly and say, "Oh wow, it's 1 a.m. My roommates are going to be so worried about me." I laugh, as if my roommate would be stupid to worry and that I hadn't been watching the clock since he picked me up at 9 p.m., and then said, "Oh, I'm so tired, I should get home soon." Again, I was super scared that he would freak out, but he didn't explode. He just looked at the clock and said, "Yeah, it was late," but I was not taking any chances, so I said, "I got a great idea. If I get to bed soon, I'd love to have breakfast with you on campus." I was hoping my offer convinced him that I was intending to see him again, and it did. He seemed very happy at the prospect of it and jumped up, walking me out of my house into his car. The drive back was excruciatingly long. The ride was completely silent, neither of us spoke, It was only a 10-minute drive, but I could have sworn that he slowed down every time we got to a particularly dark area or underpass. Dee dropped me off, and I smiled and made a good show of being tired yet excited to see him tomorrow. He offered multiple times to walk me to my door, but I declined every time and said that I didn't want to bother him and I'd see him tomorrow. I walked myself to the building, and the moment I got around the corner, I sprinted so fast up the stairs and to my door before he could change his mind and follow me to my door. When I got in my dorm room, I genuinely felt like I had just escaped a serial killer. Even now, writing it makes my heart race a bit. I never met up with him, but he begged me for multiple days after to meet up with him again. He even asked to pay me $20 an hour to sit near me in the library. I declined, obviously, and only ever saw him once after at the gym on campus. He didn't see me, and I left immediately. I thought about Dee occasionally since the date and wondered if all those girls that he had one-night stands with had the same experience I did, and I still sometimes wonder how many girls there were after me.
Pinocchio. What comes to your mind when you hear this name? A liar whose nose grew every time he lied, a puppet who was granted a chance to live a life, or a wooden boy who wished to be a human by trying to live a righteous life. To me, this word brings back a trauma of the time when Halloween was just around the corner, and everyone was trying their best to prepare for the occasion, including me. It was the start of October month 2 years ago, when my husband left home for his new mistress. My children tried to comfort me by assuring me that they will never leave me no matter what happens. It wasn't the happiest day of the month, nor was it the saddest, since the liar and the cheater had already left our family. "What are you sewing, Mama?" My 5-year-old Pan woke up from his nap and asked me while rubbing his eyes. "I'm making Halloween costumes for you and your siblings, dear," I said with a smile on my face, and then went to pick him up and put him in my lap. "My friends in the kindergarten are also going to wear costumes, Mama," he said with an innocent face and voice. After playing with him for a few more minutes, I went back to work. It took me an entire week to prepare the costumes for my 3 kids, but I had no idea what I was going to do with mine. So I went online to search for a few ideas, but I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. So I went to an anonymous page and asked for help. None of them had any better ideas except for one guy who suggested that I do a Pinocchio cosplay, which was a pretty original idea, so I thought of giving it a try. Finding materials needed for the costume was pretty hard, but that guy helped me by telling me the possible stores nearby where I'd be able to find them. I went around all the stores and found the items needed for the costume and started to make it for myself. Once I was done with the costume, there was only the wood illusion part remaining, so I decided to go to the thrift market that was around the corner. As I was roaming around the market, I couldn't find the exact shade I was looking for, and that was when I got to an alley at the end of the market that didn't seem very busy at all. There were Halloween decorations all around the area. Looking at them, my gaze went to the Pinocchio statue at the end. I went to take a closer look, and when I did, it seemed pretty realistic. I looked inside the store, and they had all kinds of things needed for a Pinocchio costume. This entire store almost seemed dedicated solely to Pinocchio. So I went in and started searching for the things I needed, and ended up buying more than what I intended to originally buy. I even bought a small button from them to Pinocchio's shoes in my size. Well, before checking out, I thought of going to the restroom first. I looked around to ask someone where it might be, and there seemed to be no one around. So I went ahead to find it myself. It took a while, but I managed to find the restroom in the back near the storage room, and I got in. After finishing up, when I tried to get out, it seemed like the door had gotten stuck, and no matter how hard I tried, it just didn't budge. So I started screaming, but even after an hour when no one came, I made my peace and started waiting silently for someone to approach the area. Another hour passed and no one came, so I got up to try opening the door again, and this time it opened just like that. I slowly opened the door, got out, and walked past the storage room when I heard noises coming from the room. I got closer and noticed the door was slightly open inside, so I tried to sneak a peek. There was a man who looked like he was making Pinocchio statues. I tried to look carefully at what looked like bodies of real boys frozen, which completely freaked me out. The man was trying to make the real Pinocchio from human boys. I got so terrified that I immediately ran outside the door without even buying any stuff that I'd picked out. As I reached home, I took everything that was related to Pinocchio and I burned them. I didn't know what else to do, so I posted the experience of the incident on that anonymous page, and that same guy was the one to reply first. But the way he said that I should not pry on others' matters seemed like he was pretty angry for me posting it. And then he corrected his comment by saying maybe I was mistaken, maybe they were statues. The way he was behaving seemed like I had discovered his secret or something. As I thought of all this, another thought occurred to my mind. What if it was this man? The uneasiness in my mind grew so much that I think I felt someone stalking me after that. So I went to the police and reported the entire incident. They said that there might be a possibility that someone was preparing for a Halloween scare like every year, and it might just be my imagination, but still, they assured me they'd look into it. I deleted my post after that, and I never went to that page either. That year, I didn't wear any kind of Halloween costume, and every Pinocchio cosplay gave me a jump scare. I couldn't help but feel that one of those real Pinocchio dolls might end up in the neighborhood along with the guy. That memory still brings back all the trauma buried inside me to this day. I just hope that all of that was just my imagination and not what I thought it was. Halloween month would be starting within a week, and I have already forbidden Pinocchio in my house.
My name is Kiara, and I was a teacher who taught at a school in Los Angeles. However, on that particular day, I had an incident that scared me so much that I couldn't forget it. It is often said that when a woman meets an unknown man, there is always a fear in her mind. Surprisingly, in my life, there was also an encounter with an unknown person, but the surprising part was that I didn't know him, and I didn't want to know him because even then, when I thought about him, I felt scared, and the incident came back to me like a bad memory. Despite that, I wanted to share this, hoping my story might help someone. I was just an ordinary girl, quite happy with my simple job as a teacher. Not only that, but I also wanted to study more, which made it challenging to spend much time with friends. Because of this, my friend Emily suggested that I create a Facebook account to stay in touch with our friends there. With that thought in mind, I joined Facebook. Honestly, I was having a lot of fun using Facebook for the first time. In reality, I had always kept myself away from social media platforms. But after joining Facebook, talking to friends and making new ones made me feel like my loneliness was starting to fade away. Whenever I had time between studies, I used to stay active on social media. After several days, Emily suggested that I should enhance my Facebook presence by sharing learning videos and increasing my followers. Motivated by this suggestion, I started posting educational videos on that social media platform. In just a few days, the number of followers began to grow. However, the happy days didn't last long when I started receiving love-filled messages from an unknown ID. I love you very much. I want to have you, even if I have to forcefully be with you. Messages like these started coming in. At first, I thought someone was joking, so thinking that way, I blocked that ID. But then, repeatedly, messages started coming from different unknown IDs, and I became quite scared. Not only that, but explicit messages started coming from that account, after which I was so frightened that I decided to close the account. However, my troubles didn't end there. As I started to forget those messages and became busy in my daily routine, one day, while returning from school after teaching the children, a student came up to me and said, "Ma'am, this letter is from a man who asked me to give it to you." Saying this, the child left. As I began to read the letter, it said, "I told you that you can't escape from me. Even though you closed your Facebook account, I will still possess you." Seeing this, I started panicking and immediately rushed home from there. Finally, when something like this happens to a woman, only another woman can understand how terrifying these moments can be. That day, I was so scared that I locked myself in my room the entire night. Suddenly, someone from outside said, "Are you okay? Open the door." The person saying this was none other than my fiancé Jack. However, at that moment, I was so terrified that I didn't dare open the door. The next morning, as soon as it dawned, I shared everything with Jack. He hugged me and tried to make me feel better, suggesting that we report the incident to the police. However, I didn't want to invest my time in all that after filing a police report. For an ordinary woman, doing all this wasn't as easy, and Jack understood that. Therefore, he decided that I should leave the school and come with him. Now, every day he would drop me off and pick me up from school. For a few days, everything was safe. During this time, there were no new incidents with me, and I didn't receive any random calls or letters. Finally, I found some slight peace of mind. However, that peace was only for a few moments. One day, as I was waiting outside the school for Jack, I received a message from him. "I won't be able to pick you up today. I got stuck due to heavy rain." It was raining so heavily that day, adding to the fear in the atmosphere. Without much thought, I started walking alone on the path ahead, hoping to find a taxi quickly. Unfortunately, due to the rain, no taxis were available. As I slowly entered a tunnel, I felt as if someone was following me. I could hear the sound of footsteps behind me, but I was so frightened that I couldn't muster the courage to turn around and see who it was. Suddenly, that man grabs me from behind. I scream, but before I can do anything, he covers my mouth and my breath starts to hitch. I am unable to comprehend what to do. He had held me so tightly that I couldn't even run. In the midst of all this, I hear police sirens in the distance. Upon hearing the sirens, the man releases his grip and quickly flees from the scene. As soon as the police jeep stops in front of me, I feel a sense of relief. "Are you okay? A thief is roaming around these days, and we are looking for him," the police tell me. Hearing this, I couldn't bring myself to say anything about the incident due to the overwhelming anxiety. Then they called a taxi for me, and I safely reached home. After sharing this incident with my fiancé Jake, we both decided to leave that city, and now we both live in New York City. Interestingly, after changing cities, the unknown messages stopped coming. Even today, when I think about that incident, I only have one thought, whether that man was the same person from Facebook or just an ordinary thief. But that moment was genuinely frightening for a woman.
I don't remember a time during my school years when I wasn't bullied by someone. And that streak ended in college, but by then, all the damage was done. Was I stronger? Perhaps. But I would trade all my strength for a chance at just a normal school experience. I lived in a regular place with enough people that not everyone knew each other, but I was unlucky because my main bullies that I thought of were 3 of the meanest girls in the world, and they followed me all throughout my formative years. They didn't officially start bullying me until about 3rd grade. I already knew what being picked on was like, but mostly from boys who were just afraid of girl cooties and all of that. But in 3rd grade, my biggest nightmare started. These 3 girls, who I'll call Janice, Emma, and Gaia, Noticed that I liked to draw during recess instead of talking to others or running around the courtyard. The first day, they took one of my drawings and threw it in the trash and then threw juice on it. I can't remember well, but I remember crying like a baby. It wasn't hard to get me to bawl my eyes out back then, and that's the main thing with these bullies. The more you reacted to them, the more they push. They were scolded at the time and separated from me, but little mean girls are tough to deter. And for years, I wished at that point that I was a boy, because I saw how boys bullied others, and it was mostly just physical. And I wish I could have fought them, but girl bullying is much sneakier and more horrible than that. Now, okay, this may be a little reductive to people who have been bullied with physical violence, but that's just how I felt. Like boys could resolve things quickly, whereas I had to play a political game against 8 and 9-year-olds. And I would only learn later that physical bullying wasn't better or easier to take, obviously. Once they noticed that they could get me crying over almost everything, I was their easiest target. I remember everything they did to me, from poking me in class with whatever sharp thing that they could find, to sending me notes with awful insults that picked at my young self-esteem. And I'm sorry, but when you're 9, reading the words, "You're so ugly, all the boys will forever hate you," it truly affects you. I broke down each time, and I couldn't control it, no matter how much I tried. As soon as I started bawling, they started laughing, and would only make me louder. Even my teachers got pretty annoyed with it. They stopped them at first, but eventually they started rolling their eyes and just continued class, sometimes ignoring me. And I guess that was easier than having to send kids to the principal and disrupt their lesson plans every single day. It took around 2 years to build up enough pain and psychological tolerance to not start crying like a baby every time they did something. But I was still tearing up, and that got them going. It spurred them on, and I still have no idea why it was so delightful for them. But it didn't matter that my tolerance for their bullying got better because we started growing up, and to be honest, things only got worse. Everything seemingly wrong that you can have as a teenager, it happened to me. I'm talking braces, bad posture, acne, frizzy and abundant hair, all that. And God, I even had a little mustache going. And although my parents cared enough to get me braces, they didn't think anything else like hair removal was really necessary. Acne and hair are parts of puberty, and my mother would say that. Now, PSA, please don't believe that. If your kids tell you that they want to get their mustache or hairy legs waxed, just let them do it. And maybe my life in general would have been better if my mom actually listened to me and allowed it, but I could have felt better about myself, I guess. Anyway, I had to get used to Janice, Emma, and Gaia's taunts through my most vulnerable times. Now this might sound silly, but someone gave me chocolates one time and I ate them at recess, and I was still figuring out stuff with braces, and I thought that I had eaten everything without getting food stuck in my braces. But I did get chocolate stuck, and I quickly noticed that that was the plan all along. I went back to class, and somehow the girls had gotten one boy, this boy named Julian, to ask me if I liked the chocolates. I remember he was pretty popular, so I was shocked and immediately smiled, my chocolate-covered, bracy smile at him. And everyone started laughing, him included. This happened around the time phones started coming with cameras, and I remember they took pictures, and I was just mortified. I can't even imagine how I would have felt if those pictures ended up online. But if they were only passed around between our peers, and they were luckily very low resolution, I cried silently, as I had learned to do, and cleaned my mouth when that period ended. Tons of things like that happened over the years. It was only when we made it to high school that their attitude changed a little. I had learned not to cry at all. It hurt. The ridicule was still terrible. The absolute negligence or just lack of caring of the school staff really tore me up too, but I had finally learned to control my tears. And I learned that bullies can sense, smell, detect fear and pain and low self-esteem. They had messed with me so much over the years that I think that it was just habit for them, but when I stopped crying, they stopped caring. Finally, I would spend days without a single taunt from these girls, or anyone really. I was already known as the loner, a weirdo girl who was always drawing, but no one was messing with me. High school also presented other things for everyone. Janice, Emma, and Gaia developed their own interests like cheerleading, school government, and Model UN. And yeah, it sucks, but the truth is that not every bully is just a complete idiot. I had art club, and a lot of us were introverts, so I can't say I made a bunch of friends, but I fit in there somehow. And that made me bolder. Whenever they remembered me, like in the halls or in class, I just simply ignored them. It sounds stupid and simple because that's what adults tell you to do about bullies, but ignoring them wasn't easy, and I was glad I managed it. That is until I got a group project with this guy Gaia was interested in. I didn't pick him, I didn't even like him, and I remember his name was Tony. The teacher assigned us together and we only worked at school after hours, and that's how Gaia saw us. We were at the library using the computers there, and the next day, those girls were on me like they hadn't been in years. They came into the girls' bathroom after me, and I hadn't seen them walking behind me until it was too late, closed the door and pushed me into a stall. Now, I had learned to gray rock them in the past, which is pretty much just ignoring them, but I couldn't with this level of aggression. I fell back onto the toilet and hit my back on the pipe pretty badly. I was trying to recover from the pain when Gaia hit me square in the face with a big algebra book. I yelled at them at last while I was trying to feel if she had actually broken my nose. Gaia got closer and grabbed my hair. She asked what I was doing with Tony, and I told her through harsh breaths that we had been assigned a project. After hearing that, Gaia finally let go of me, and right on cue came the worst sound in the world. Their laughter. And I hadn't heard that cackle in a while. Almost mechanically, I started crying, not just from the pain of the physical blows, but it was also just automatic. I was a little girl again, and they kept laughing and saying things like, "Of course, Tony could never like a girl like her. Gaia, you should have known that it was something stupid for school." I remember Gaia's smirk and how she said that it didn't matter because I needed to be taught a lesson, and how fun it would be to see me cry again. Janice got real close to my face and added, "You thought we forgot about you, huh? Well, we didn't. We just have better things to do. And the next time you get close to one of our guys, this will be much worse." I remember those words. And our guys. I didn't even know Gaia liked him. I was just sobbing, and finally someone opened the door. It was a teacher that I hadn't met before, and she asked what was going on, and Emma said that they didn't know. They found me crying in the bathroom and wanted to help, but I wouldn't tell them what was wrong. And the girls left, and the teacher tried to ask what was wrong, but I just kept crying and crying. My mother picked me up and gave me a lecture about getting a call from the school. I wailed that I was bullied and no one cared or believed me, and I got grounded for doing that. I mean, my mom wasn't mean or anything, but she just couldn't understand. And according to her stories, she was popular. I went to school the next day with actual bruises that no one asked a word about. Really nice, huh? And I asked that teacher to let me do the project alone, and I even begged her. Tony could easily be placed with another group, and she ended up doing it. I avoided all the boys from then on, insisting on working alone or with girls if that was possible, and the teacher thought that I feared boys, but they didn't ask why, and the rest started a rumor about me being a lesbian, and you can probably guess how I was bullied about that. But ignoring everyone became my thing. I even ignored anyone who tried to be nice to me. They had broken me after all those years with that stupid bathroom encounter, and perhaps it wasn't them, but others who didn't care about me, or it could have been my mother's attitude. Either way, I just felt shattered inside. You're probably waiting for some revenge that I got, but I didn't get one. There's a silver lining, though. At 18, I left my house and went to college. I found friends, still introverted, and finally shaved wherever I wanted. I dare say that I became pretty to myself, which was a big accomplishment considering how I felt before. And as for Janice, Guy, and Emma, I think they're living good lives, for the most part. And that's not what most people like to hear, but that's real life. Maybe karma will get them one day, but maybe not. My name's Chris. I'm a longtime fan from Melbourne, Australia, and the story I've got for you actually involves you and your YouTube channel in a sort of roundabout way. I met my girlfriend in May of 2019, and it was her that introduced me to your videos. I'm not gonna lie. At first I did think it was a bit weird that scary stories seemed to help her fall asleep, but after a while, I started to see the appeal, and we'd often put on a video while doing the dishes after dinner. This became something of a long-time ritual for us. Then sometime in late February the following year, we were listening to some camping stories of yours when my girlfriend suggested that we pay a visit to the Onondaga Valley. Onondaga Valley is about a 4-hour drive out of Melbourne, and it's a fairly popular destination for hikers and campers. I know it probably makes us sound a bit mental to listen to a load of scary camping stories and then be like, well, that sounds like a good time, sign me up. But we're actually aware of how rare any kind of rural crime is. We didn't feel like we would be in any danger, and we weren't, in all fairness. But then, at the same time, that makes what I'm about to tell you pretty bloody ironic. So we drive out to Onondaga and remember the exact date being the 21st of March, 2020. We bought a load of camping gear online, and we were looking for a good spot to pitch our tents when we came across a couple of other campers. They were standing just off the trail, and about 10 to 15 meters away was a burned-out utility vehicle and what looked like charred remains of a tent. There was a man and a woman there, fairly young-looking, and the man was pacing back and forth with his phone to his ear, looking majorly concerned. My first thought was that these guys had accidentally set their tent or ute on fire, which had then caused the other to catch fire. God knows how they might have managed that, but figuring out exactly what had happened wasn't the first thing on our minds. We just wanted to make sure that the couple was all right. As we're walking up the trail, the guy thanked whoever he was talking to on his phone and then just hung up just in time to greet us as we got closer. It turns out it wasn't their campsite. They just had come across it at the same time as we did and figured they'd report it since it was obviously fresh. We could smell that charred kind of burn smell from all the way over on the trail, so he was right when he said that it must have been fresh. But the guy said that there was some untouched food lying around too, recently purchased stuff, which made him think that it wasn't just some dickhead teenagers looking to destroy the evidence of their last night's joyride. The bloke had actually been on the phone to the coppers right as we turned up, which was obviously the right thing to do. But since someone was already dealing with it, me and my girl just kept on walking after wishing the other couple good luck. It sounds crazy looking back on it, but at the same time, we didn't think there was anything sinister going on. What it looked like was that there had been some kind of horrible accident and someone was potentially hurt. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood or any other sort of human remains. It didn't look like what it was. Not long after we got back, my girlfriend sent me a link on Facebook to a local news story. The burned-out ute and tent that we'd come across belonged to an elderly couple who had been out camping just like we had. But instead of getting the help that they needed, they hadn't shown up anywhere at all, and they were still considered missing people. There was a big appeal for information, so obviously me and the missus got in touch to offer our services, but to be honest, I'm not sure that we were of much help at all. We'd been in the valley for 2 nights, but aside from the run-in with the couple and the burned tents, we hadn't heard or seen anything even remotely suspicious. And for a while, we started to worry that the couple that we'd seen might have been in on it in some way. I mean, we just rocked up and asked if they needed any help and then walked off after a quick chit-chat. The bloke told me that he'd been on the phone with the emergency services, but I had no way of knowing that for certain. We'd mentioned them to the police when we called them, and they told us that they'd already talked extensively to the person who made the call. But they didn't tell us exactly when the call was made, and neither did they give us any details on the person that had made it. Spoilers, but we really were just being a bit overly paranoid, because the couple we bumped into had nothing to do with the missing people, and we found that out for certain about 18 months later when the bodies of the missing couple finally showed up. It was sad, and I hate to sound harsh here or whatever, but it wasn't really a surprise to me or my girlfriend. This poor old couple had gone missing after some kind of accidental fire had inflicted God knows what kind of injuries to them. It seemed like they'd gotten lost, gotten hurt, or even worse. Then, sadly, they'd succumbed to the elements and passed away. I remember my girlfriend saying that, say they'd been in the tent whilst it was on fire. They could have inhaled all kinds of nasty smoke on the way out, not to mention getting burned and then those burns getting infected or something. It was just an all-round horrible, tragic way to go out, and you really felt for the couple. But then the news broke that it hadn't been any kind of accident at all. The elderly couple had been murdered, and their ute and tent had been burned to get rid of any physical evidence their killer might have left behind. Knowing we'd come across the scene of a murder like that, and in complete ignorance too, it was chilling. According to things we read online, the murder had taken place not even 24 hours before we arrived. If we'd left the day before, we might have even seen them, hanging around their little campsite. We might have even swapped a good day or two going past, or at the very best, maybe the trail being a bit busier might have saved their lives. It felt terrible for their families, for their friends, but at the same time, we couldn't help but wonder about the gorier details. Call it morbid curiosity, but my girl and I were pretty desperate to know what had happened to that poor old couple. I mean, we spent 2 nights in the valley after they were killed, so were we in any danger at all? Was someone just hunting people at random, or had it been some kind of personal thing? As it turns out, it was neither of those things. It wasn't some psycho serial killer stalking the valley for victims, nor had the killer and his victims ever laid eyes on each other before. The murders happened because of an argument that started over a bloody drone. The whole thing is going through the courts now, or at least it was when I had the idea to write this all up and send it over to you. I tell you to look it up for yourself, but it's as confusing as it is depressing. The killer's defense lawyers are saying that his victim pointed a gun at him and that he somehow managed to rush the guy, grab the gun, and then killed the elderly couple, both man and wife, before he burned all the evidence. He even burned their bodies too, and there's court testimony of him saying how he felt terrible for doing it, how he vomited from the smell. All this stuff trying to make him seem like a victim of the whole thing too. It's just gross, man. But anyways, all the best with your channel and all that, and best of luck in the future. I don't know when this bloke's going to be sentenced or whatever, but I hope it's for a bloody long time. Fancy killing someone over a drone. It hardly bears to think about.
Have you ever seen a photograph on the internet of an old woman draped in a headscarf, standing amidst a vast field with a dog by her side? The story behind this seemingly ordinary picture is nothing short of haunting. Allow me to share with you the spine-chilling tale that lies behind it. Sometime in the 1900s, there was a man by the name of Charlie Noonan who spent his days journeying across the southern and southwestern regions of the United States. He had an insatiable passion for folklore and tales of the supernatural. He made it a point to converse with locals about their legends and beliefs, carefully cataloging them along the way. Whenever he stumbled upon something that caught his eye, a curious object or an unusual sight, he would capture it with his camera. His travels were marked with wonder and curiosity as he sought to uncover the mysteries of the land he traversed. Charlie, an adventurer at heart, one day embarked on a journey to Oklahoma to uncover the local legends of the land. Upon arriving at his destination, he set out to explore the area and gather new stories. While wandering around the northwest region of Oklahoma, he stumbled upon a farm and couldn't resist the urge to inquire about the hair-raising legends surrounding the area. Eager to learn more, he began to ask around to discover the mystical tales that lay hidden within the land. As he was conversing with some locals, he came across a farmer who shared a fabled tale about the farm surrounding the area. The rural dweller spoke of an eerie legend he believed to be true. He narrated a curious account of a mysterious old woman who resided in a solitary estate in the Panhandle, known for always concealing her face behind a scarf. The farmer claimed that she was not human, but something else entirely. The woman was always accompanied by a colossal, powerful gray canine that always remained by her side. Folks in the area had frequently spotted the mysterious woman wandering around the vast fields and endless plains, and even venturing into the remote Panhandle. She maintained an elusive presence, never engaging directly with anyone who crossed her. However, whispers occasionally emanated from her lips as she strolled alongside her dog. I think the dog was there for her protection, but for those who believed her to be an entirely different entity than a human, the dog was seen as nothing more than a loyal companion. She was an enigma to the people who lived there. Her aura was cloaked in a haunting darkness that made people uneasy. Those who had the misfortune of encountering her claimed that her piercing eyes glowed with an unnerving intensity that sent chills down their spine. The entire land she resided in was shrouded in an ominous atmosphere that made one feel on edge. According to that farmer, some believed she was a demon, while others whispered that she was a witch. No one dared to approach her, let alone thought of harming her. As soon as Charlie heard the intriguing story, he felt a strong urge to seek out the mysterious woman described in the farmer's tale. He was captivated by the legend and determined to uncover the truth behind it. Without delay, he picked up his camera and stepped out of the farmhouse door, heading straight for the Oklahoma Panhandle. With a glint of excitement in his eyes, he embarked on a journey to find the elusive woman, hoping to capture her image on camera if luck was on his side. Many years had passed since Charlie embarked on his quest to find her, and he had not been seen or heard from since that fateful day. But one day, as a wandering drifter traversed the vast field, he stumbled upon an intriguing discovery, an abandoned device lying amidst the tall grass. It was weathered and worn, but still intact, and the drifter saw the potential to make a few dollars by selling it. He took the device to a nearby pawnbroker and sold it to him. But little did he know the truth behind what he had found. Upon examining the vintage camera, the Tulsa pawnbroker's eyes fell upon the name Noonan engraved on its surface, who remembered reading about Charlie's disappearance in the papers. An impulsive took hold of him, and he felt compelled to reunite the camera with its rightful owner. With dogged determination, he embarked upon a quest to find the person to whom this device had once belonged. After a long and arduous search, he finally contacted Ellie Noonan, Charlie's wife, a woman who had been waiting for her husband's return. Ellie had been searching for her husband ever since he disappeared, but was only met with dead ends. She had begun to lose hope as the years passed without a single clue about where Charlie could be. That was why the pawnbroker's unexpected visit filled her with a glimmer of hope as he handed the camera back to her, reuniting her with a piece of her husband's past. As soon as she acquired the camera, she eagerly had the only photograph on the roll developed, hoping to find a clue of her husband's whereabouts, only to meet disappointment and an unknown horror. The lone image depicted an elderly woman donning a scarf and standing alongside a dog. The woman's eyes seemed to emit an eerie glow, conveying something horrifying. Despite extensive searches, Charlie Noonan's disappearance remained a mystery, and over time, his story became an urban legend.
The mystery surrounding the ominous picture of the woman has left many wondering what truly happened that day. Some speculate that it is just an intriguing urban myth, while others believe that there may be some truth to the story. I can't help but wonder if the woman was really a demon or a witch with mysterious powers. If not, then what do you think really happened to Charlie? Did he simply vanish without a trace after capturing that eerie image? Or is there a darker, more sinister explanation behind the mystery yet to be uncovered?
The summer of 2012 had just begun, and I was looking forward to a relaxing vacation at home with my family. However, little did I know that my wife had other plans. One day while I was lounging on my new recliner and watching a football game, I heard my wife clearing her throat. It was a sound I had grown accustomed to over the years, but this time it was different. There was a certain urgency to it that made me sit up and take notice. I turned my head towards her and saw that she was looking at me with a solemn expression on her face. I hesitated for a moment, knowing that whatever she needed was going to take away my peace, for she only made that peculiar expression when something serious was on her mind. She then proceeded to tell me that her family had planned an exciting cruise trip. Before I could even express my thoughts on the matter, she broke the news that she had already discussed it with my family, and they had all agreed to go. I was instantly taken aback, feeling a bit annoyed that she had made such a big decision without consulting me first. It wasn't the first time she had done something like this, and it left me feeling like our relationship was unbalanced. I couldn't help but feel like my opinion didn't matter to her as much as her own desires and the wishes of her family. Despite my initial frustration, I decided to let it go. Since I didn't want to go, I tried to convince her to take the kids with her, but she was adamant I'd go with them. I knew what the outcome was going to be, but it was still worth a try. I reluctantly agreed, knowing that it was my responsibility as a father and a husband. That is how I went on a cruise trip with my wife's family in mind. However, there was one thing that was bothering me. A few members of Natasha's family, with whom I didn't see eye to eye, I was worried that their presence might spoil the mood and the trip could go in the opposite direction of fun. But since they were part of the family package, we had to take them along. On the first day of the trip, we were having a great time exploring the ship and enjoying the amenities. The food was excellent, the weather was perfect, and everyone seemed to be getting along well. But then, out of nowhere, Natasha's brother Sam suggested that we play a challenging game. Now, let me tell you why I referred to him as obnoxious. It wasn't because he was loud or aggressive, but because he had a habit of not taking no for an answer once he had made up his mind. Natasha was having seasickness, so she passed, and I didn't want to play any of his weird games. At first it was fun, but soon enough, things started to get intense when Sam's challenges started getting more complicated. We watched as the twisted game started, and they would give each other a weird yet tricky challenge to overcome. There was this adjacent balcony bank in a row, and due to a challenge, Sam tried to climb to it. It wasn't like someone else told him to do that. He gave that challenge to himself. It looked daunting, but Sam was up for the challenge. The rest of us watched anxiously as he attempted to scale the wall. The sound of his hands and feet scrambling against the rough surface echoed through the balcony. While we were all amazed by his determination, we couldn't help but worry that he might fall. As I stood on the balcony, watching Sam attempt to climb, the sound of crashing waves filled the air. The moon was hidden behind clouds, making it difficult to see the waves, but their force was evident in the way the water sprayed up the side of the building. Suddenly, a huge wave hit, sending water rushing up to the balcony level. Sam's foot slipped on the wet surface and he lost his grip, tumbling over the balcony railing and into the dark, choppy water below. Panic erupted among the group as we scrambled to search for him, shouting his name and scanning the water with our flashlights. The sound of crashing waves and the fear of not finding him weighed heavy on our hearts as we desperately hoped for a glimpse of him in the darkness. Without wasting any time, we immediately dialed the emergency services and reported the incident. The operator on the other end of the line was calm and composed and assured us that help was on the way. After what seemed like an eternity, a search party of experienced divers was dispatched to the location. They were well equipped with advanced diving gear, including underwater cameras, sonar systems, and diving suits. Upon arriving at the scene, they conducted a thorough assessment of the area, strategizing the best course of action to take. The divers then began their search, descending into the depths of the ocean with great care and precision. They meticulously combed the area, thoroughly scanning every nook and cranny until they finally found Sam. He was then quickly brought to the surface in a critical condition, where he was immediately taken to the hospital for medical attention. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it and died after a few hours of being in the emergency room. We were devastated by the news, and my wife, who loved her brother dearly, couldn't take it very well and passed out almost immediately. Even after waking up, she was panicking, and I tried my best to calm her down. She cried for days, and sometimes it would be hard for me to handle her grief. Her brother's death changed her. She stopped visiting her family entirely. I know I said I didn't like her family all that much, but it was heartbreaking to see my wife in such a state. It's been 10 years since that incident. My wife has developed severe PTSD and is still unable to go on a cruise.
You're his girlfriend? What the hell are you talking about? I'm the one who is his girlfriend. We've been dating for almost a week now. The girl screamed at me, which seriously only pissed me off more. For those of you who are thinking, what's going on here? Then let me tell you that I am having a conversation with the girl I saw kissing my man. And now she had the audacity to talk back to me saying she is the girlfriend. I'm Cecilia Walker, and I'm a 20-year-old college dropout. I have been dating my boyfriend Alex for over 6 months, and today I found out that he is cheating on me. I have loved him with all my heart, and he betrayed me just like this. Is love nothing in this world? This world and the people living in it both are cursed. If it were up to me, I would eradicate every single one of these people from the face of the earth. I regret ever loving Alex. I met Alex in college before dropping out. I was in the second year of B-Arch, and Alex was in the final year. Most of our lectures were combined, so he was mostly in the same class as me, but I never took notice of him at first. I was one of those shy girls who would only focus on her own existence, and nothing or no one intrigued me. I was only a spectator of others' relationships and never had been in one myself. That day, I was alone in the class eating my lunch when I noticed a boy sleeping in the back seat. I knew who he was. He was the most popular guy in college, Alex. He was popular for being clumsy and handsome, but despite being popular, I never thought of him as someone interesting. He rubbed his eyes with his hand while sleeping. It was because his hair was messy and poking his eyes a bit, so I just went there and brushed it off with my hand. That was when I realized how handsome his face looked. So, he really is handsome how people say. That's what I was thinking, and I was staring when he suddenly opened his eyes, which made me flustered, and I immediately went back to my seat. It looked like he was about to say something, but the class bell rang, and students started to enter. The next day when I reached the class, I saw him sitting in the next seat with mine. I walked slowly there and sat in my seat. After that, I took out my notebook, and I started to focus on the lecture. I could feel his gaze over me, but he wasn't saying anything, so I completely ignored it and kept looking in my notebook. Let's date. I turned my head toward him in an instant. He was looking at me. I thought I must be hearing things. There were no way he would ever ask me to date him. I know you're not seeing someone, so there's no point denying it. Besides, I saw you yesterday checking me out. My entire body turned red when he said that. I did not say a word and kept staring at my book with my mind blank. Next few days, he started to follow me everywhere I go, asking me to say yes. It was not like I did not want to date him, but he was infamous for being a serial dater. I kept rejecting him, but he was so persistent that he just wouldn't let it go. What is it about me that is making you not even consider dating me? I was going to the library, and as always, he was following me. As he asked me this question, I stopped in my track and turned my head towards him. What do you think? You have earned yourself the title of serial dater. I glared directly in his eyes, and he burst into laughter. You know that my friends are the ones spreading these rumors about me. You don't really believe it to be true, do you? I felt a bit guilty because I did believe it, and it was also true that I never saw him dating anyone, or maybe I never noticed because I wasn't interested before. Just say yes. Trust me, you won't regret it. He looked at me with his cute puppy eyes, which made me smile, and he brightened up. I'll take that as a yes. After saying that, he went ahead to the class. I couldn't believe I got into my first ever relationship. I started noticing his every move without even realizing. His smile, his clothes, his smell, what cologne he was wearing when it's not his natural scent. I could notice it all. He switched his seat permanently and started sitting by my side. One day I heard some girls talking over Alex being so handsome and all, and the same day I saw Alex talking with a big smile on his face with one of those girls. I felt so jealous that I wasn't able to control my anger. When he came to my side, I asked him, "What was that about?" I pointed my finger towards the girl. "Why, is my baby being jealous already?" he asked playfully in a response which made me even angrier. "It was nothing, it's Agatha, she's just a friend." He sensed my anger and explained, but even that didn't subside my anger. The next day, Agatha did not come to class, and I did not care either. I was happy that Alex won't be able to talk to her anymore. But even after that, she completely stopped coming, so people assumed that she had dropped out. Almost 5 months passed, and it was finally the time when Alex was to get his graduation degree and was supposed to leave the college after that, which made me extremely sad. So I decided to drop out of college as well and stay with me. But when I asked him, and he got angry with me, saying I should focus on completing my graduation. Still, I persisted and finally dropped out. Alex wasn't happy about it. "I think we should break up." Alex called me out to meet, and when I reached there, the first thing he said was this. "Why? What's wrong?" I was nervous. I could not understand why he was saying something like that. "I never knew when I asked you out that you would drop from college, jeopardizing your own career for me. I really like you, Cecilia, but I don't want to be the reason of your demise." I still could not understand what he was talking about, why he was asking to leave me. I wasn't doing something wrong. I was in love with him. Besides, he was the one who kept bothering me to date him, and now he was doing this? But I did this so I could stay together with you. I would continue my college later. Just don't do this, Alex. I pleaded with him, but he did not say anything except that he will talk about this later, and left. I wanted to ask him to move in with me, but I couldn't. It was our first fight ever, and I wanted to make up with him as soon as possible. The next day I got ready and thought of surprising him in his apartment, but as I was about to reach, I was Alex talking to another girl near his apartment building. I had flowers in my hand, which I crumbled. As the girl left, I immediately stomped over them. "Who was she? Is that why you were asking to leave me?" He looked annoyed by my questions. "Come on, Cecilia, don't make a scene here. She's just my neighbor, and you know why I asked for a breakup." He walked away after saying that. Everything was just putting fuel in my anger. The next day, I got a call from Alex. I was so happy, but my happiness faded away as soon as I answered it. "Did you do something to Brittany? She's missing from yesterday." So he called me to ask for that bitch. "I don't know, Alex. Why would I do something to her?" I disconnected the call after saying that. I guess our fight was going to drag out a bit longer before we make up again. After a week or two, I saw Alex kissing a girl in his parking lot when I went there to apologize to him because it had gone way too long. Every time. Why? Why must he do this to me? I thought, feeling extreme anger and throbbing pain in my chest. But this time, I decided to confront the girl first and not Alex. When she was going back, I stopped her in the way. I asked her why she is kissing my boyfriend, and what she told me surprised me even more that Alex had started to date this girl too. I showed the girl pictures of me and Alex together, which I guess pissed her off too. She wanted to confront him, but I asked her not to. You know what? Let's forget about that cheater. He has done this to me so many times that I don't even want to see his dirty, cheap face. Let's go to my place and have a little drinking party. She declined at first, but I am a pretty convincing person, so I managed to take her with me. Wow, I never knew your place was in such a secluded area, she laughed when she reached. Yeah, I am pretty rich. I bought this place for me and Alex, but I guess he'll never be able to see it now, I said while unlocking the door. And as soon as we stepped inside, she started to look nervous. Why is it so dark in here? It looks like... I didn't let her finish her sentence and hit her on her head. She really thought she could get away by kissing my man. I dragged to the secret room in the basement and tied her in one of the poles. I sat there, waiting for her to wake up. After a while, when she woke up and looked around, I could tell by her face that she was horrified. Oh, them? The one tied to your right pole is Agatha, who tried to seduce Alex during college, so I made her this way. And the one tied on your left one is Brittany. She is here for almost a week now. Oh, don't worry, they are alive. Barely, but alive. I laughed out loud and went near her. Please, let me go. I swear I would break up with him and cut contacts with him. Just spare me, please. As soon as I ripped the tape off her mouth, she started blabbering. It wasn't something that I didn't hear from the other two. I simply took out the cutter and started to chop off her mouth from which she kissed Alex. The place was solid soundproofed, so her screams couldn't go outside from here. After I was finished with her, I texted Alex. Let's meet. I guess it's finally the time we break up properly. I was tired of his shit. I guess first love really is painful.
Accused. It had been about 6 months or so since I moved to this new neighborhood, but it wasn't until recently that people experienced a series of burglaries. I could feel the tension in the air whenever I walked past others, as I could tell people were on edge and suspicious of their neighbors. I had no idea I was being suspected until one morning when I was getting ready for my part-time job, the doorbell rang. I was shocked to see 2 officers at my doorstep as I opened the door. They started asking me questions without trying to hide that I was getting suspected. Unfortunately, I had caught the attention of the police due to my criminal record from my younger years. Despite my best efforts to become a better person, people were quick to judge me based on my past. I wouldn't have revealed the bitter part of my life if it hadn't been for my job. I tried to explain to the officers that I had nothing to do with the burglaries, but they didn't believe me. After telling me that some neighbors strongly thought it was me, I was arrested and sent to prison. They didn't tell me who those neighbors were. I couldn't believe that I was being punished for something I didn't do. A few days later, when officers couldn't find any evidence against me, they had no other choice but to let me go. The worst part was that even after I was released, people still looked at me with suspicion. It was hard to shake off my past, even though I had worked so hard and had done everything in my power to turn my life around. I thought I could finally put this behind me, but I was wrong. A few days went by and another burglary happened. It wasn't until I saw the 2 nosy women, the oldest residents in the neighborhood, who were the true definition of a Karen, shout at me, "Get out of this place, you criminal!" when I was returning from work one day, that I found out who those neighbors were who were convinced that I was the culprit. After that day, they didn't try to hide their malice and hatred for me and would openly accuse me in front of others. They tried everything they could to make my life miserable and prove me guilty. It was to the point that it almost felt as if they were purposefully trying to divert people's attention toward me. They even spread rumors about me and vandalized my property. Slowly, other people started to get influenced by their behaviors and would give me dirty looks when I would pass by. The children and teenagers would openly call me names. I was at my wit's end. I had done nothing wrong, yet I was treated like a criminal. I tried to reason with those women, but they refused to listen. They were convinced I was responsible for the burglaries, and they wouldn't stop until they had proof. By that point, I had started to suspect that there was something fishy about those two. That day wasn't going well for me because it looked like the owners of the place where I worked were planning to fire me due to the rumors and were trying to hire my replacement before doing that. I spent the work hours worried, and after finishing my work, I headed home half-heartedly. As I approached my house, I noticed that the front door was slightly ajar. My heart began to race as I quickly realized that something was wrong. I rushed inside my home and saw that it had been completely ransacked. My belongings were thrown around, my drawers emptied, and my furniture upturned. I was in shock and confusion, not knowing what to do. I immediately called the police and reported the break-in. The officers arrived quickly and searched the premises, but they didn't find any evidence pointing to the culprits. However, when questioned, those two women accused me of staging the burglary to cover up my tracks. Their accusations were unfounded and hurtful, adding insult to injury. I was shocked and hurt. I couldn't believe that they would go so far as to frame me for a crime I didn't even do. But I knew that I had to prove my innocence once and for all and find out the truth as to why they were so set on to blame me for those burglaries. Being fed up with false accusations, I decided to start my own investigation. I began by questioning the neighbors and gathering evidence. To my surprise, I found a pattern that led me to suspect those two women. Whenever there was a burglar in the area, they would either be out of town or sleeping inside their homes. What was even more unusual was that they would always do these things together. This coincidence seemed too strange to ignore, and it raised a lot of suspicion in my mind. I decided to keep a close eye on them and monitor their activities moving forward. After a bit more investigation and looking into the whereabouts of those days, I eventually uncovered the truth. It turned out that the two women had been behind the burglaries all along. They had been stealing from their neighbors to support their lavish lifestyle and had framed me to divert suspicion away from themselves. I presented the evidence to the police and the women were arrested. They were charged with burglary and framing an innocent man. I was finally vindicated, and my name was cleared. The incident taught me a valuable lesson about how people can be quick to judge based on one's past and how difficult it can be to gain their trust and acceptance even after being wrongfully accused. Although I worked hard to become a respected member of the community, it still seemed that some of my neighbors continued to hold my past against me, and I never truly felt like I belonged. It's better to remember that everyone deserves a fair chance and that people can change for the better, but it can be hard to overcome people's preconceived notions. Despite this, I remain hopeful that with time and effort, people will eventually see me for who I am now and not who I used to be.
Date at her house. I was scrolling through Tinder when I was matched with a woman named Jessica. She was this hot, curvy woman, and just looking at her picture made me feel lustful. I went to check her profile out only to find she was divorced and had a kid. Normally I would have swiped left without a second thought, but something about her intrigued me. I decided to take a chance and message her. As we talked, I found myself becoming more and more interested in her. She was smart, funny, and had a lot of interesting things to say. We chatted for a while, and every time she said something flirty, my heart skipped a beat. I couldn't deny that I was feeling incredibly attracted to her. Despite my reservations about dating someone who was divorced with a child, I found myself wanting to see where this could go. After only 2 days of dating Jessica, I was already having intense and naughty dreams about her. It was as if she had cast a spell on me and I couldn't get her out of my head. One day, while I was lost in thought about her, she texted me, asking if I wanted to come over to her place while her son was away with his dad. I couldn't believe my luck and felt a rush of excitement as I read her message. Without wasting any time, I replied with an enthusiastic yes. She then asked me if I could bring something for her to get high, explaining that she was feeling the urge. Although I wasn't exactly thrilled about the idea of smoking, I couldn't say no to her. I wanted to make her happy and spend as much time with her as possible. I quickly got up and got ready, taking my time to choose the perfect outfit. I finally headed to her place, my heart pounding with anticipation. Taking a deep breath, I walked up to Jessica's door, feeling my nerves fluttering in my stomach. I raised my hand and knocked on the door, my heart beating fast as I waited for her to answer. When the door opened, I was struck by her beauty. She was wearing a stunning teal dress that clung to her curves in all the right places, perfectly complementing her smooth caramel skin. Her hair was styled in loose waves that cascaded down her back, and her eyes glimmered with a hint of excitement. I tried my best to hide the fact that the mere sight of her turned me on, but I couldn't help the way my heart rate quickened and my palms started to sweat. She smiled warmly at me, and I knew this would be a night to remember. Her living room was spacious and tastefully decorated, with a big sectional couch taking center stage. Jessica gestured for me to take a seat, and I sank into the soft cushions, feeling a little nervous but also excited about what was to come. She gave me a seductive smile as she asked me if I had brought what she had asked for. I nodded my head in agreement, took out a roll of pot from my pocket and handed it to her. She lit it with a matchstick and took a long drag before passing it to me. We took a few more puffs, passing the roll back and forth between us, enjoying the moment's intimacy. But soon I realized that I didn't want to smoke anymore. I handed it to her back, and she continued smoking until she finished the last bit of it. Then she got up from the couch, headed towards one of the rooms, telling me that she would be back soon. I waited for her, feeling nervous and excited at the same time. My mind was racing with the possibility of us making love, and I couldn't wait for her to return. She finally emerged from her room after a few minutes and sat on the other end of the couch without saying a word. That's when I noticed the mechanical pencil she was holding. She was gripping it so hard that her knuckles were white. Concerned, I asked her if everything was okay. Instead of replying, she stared at me for what felt like an eternity with a blank expression. It was unnerving. Finally, after 2 minutes of silence, she spoke. There are voices in my head. Hearing her words filled me with an inexplicable sense of dread. I had no idea what she meant, but before I could say anything, she continued. They want me to do something. Her eyes were wide with a weird look on her face, and that's when I noticed the pencil sharpener edge was pointed towards me. I felt the knot form in my stomach as I realized that something was seriously wrong. I hesitantly asked, "Do what?" She looked at me with the same deadpan expression before whispering a reply, "Stab you." My heart was racing as I nervously chuckled, hoping she was joking, but the dead expression on Jessica's face remained the same. Her gaze seemed too intense and fixated on me, and I couldn't shake off the feeling of unease. I then hesitantly asked to use her bathroom, got up, and made my way there. As I walked down the hallway, I couldn't help but notice the eerie silence that seemed to pervade the entire house. That was when I noticed her garage door was open, and a chill ran down my spine. Without a second thought, I dashed there and exited through the garage. As I drove home, I couldn't shake off the feeling of dread that had settled in my stomach. I knew that I had to take action to protect myself from any potential danger. I immediately blocked her from every possible mode of communication and never texted or called again. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months, and I continued to reflect on that incident. Looking back, I realized how lucky I was to have trusted my intuition and acted on it. I shudder to think what could have happened if I hadn't listened to my gut feeling. It's a lesson that I will never forget and a reminder to always prioritize my safety above everything else.
This story occurred during the 2017 Christmas holiday. I was living in a city about 700 miles away from where I grew up. Every year for the last 5, I'd return to my parents' home to celebrate the holidays with them. This year would be no different. My job at the time was to provide customer service for a global computer software company based in my state. 5 days a week, I spoke to customers, some furious and some clueless. The call that spawned this mess started like almost any other. The gentleman on the phone had a few questions regarding his warranty. I answered them as well as I could. Once or twice, there was a brief gap in the call as I waited for the computer to give me the information I needed. As you do during periods of silence, the caller began making small talk. I joined in, not thinking anything bad would become that. Over the course of the discussion, he made note of my accent and asked what state I was from. I answered, and it turned out that he lived in that state. Before I knew it, we were discussing our hometowns, and he turned out to live just a town over from the one I grew up in. The entire conversation seemed innocent. When he asked if I ever went back home, I said I did every Christmas. Nothing more was said after that. He thanked me for my help and hung up. The call was so ordinary that I'd forgotten about it by the end of my shift. A few weeks would pass, and I would take a flight back home to celebrate with my parents. The scary part of the story begins here. It was December 23rd, and I was helping my folks put up the tree. Doorbell rang, and when I opened the door, a man had been recognized on the porch. I kindly asked him if I could help. He looked at me puzzled and said something like, "Mike, come on, it's Daryl." These are not our actual names, of course. When I talked to you on the phone, we made plans to hang out. Honestly, I had no idea what this man was talking about. He reminded me, and the discussion slowly came back to me. I did remember some vague talk about us possibly getting together, but no vital information had been shared. I was trying to be nice with you to do strangers with common connections and never had any intention of meeting the guy. Most men understand this silly game, but he obviously didn't. He had me backed into a corner, and I didn't want to be rude, so I made up a story about being needed around the house. This wasn't a complete lie. I suggested we could possibly meet up the next day and ask for his phone number. The answer seemed to please him, and he laughed. I'm ashamed to admit it took me a few hours for the oddity of the situation to hit me. First and foremost, how in God's name did he get my parents' address? I knew for a fact I never gave it to him. I'm still not sure how he got my last name. The creepiness of the situation made me shiver. Now I found myself at a crossroad. Did I call him and ask how he found me? Or do I just ghost him and hope I didn't hear from him again? After a long night of tossing and turning, I chose the latter. Call me worse all you want, but I very much dislike confrontations. This path just sounded easier to me, and it's too bad it didn't work. Christmas Eve arrived, and I planned to spend it with my extended family. Things went well until my phone began to ring around 10:30 that evening. No one I knew would call me that late, so I thought answered with a bit of curt tone in my voice. And Daryl came at me with an attitude from the start. I'm the one that should be mad. We were supposed to go out tonight and you bailed on me. His tone set me off. I told him I never promised him anything, and he shouldn't assume someone would be free to drop everything on Christmas to meet up with a stranger. He began to talk, but I cut him off. I continued by asking how I got my personal information and told him I didn't appreciate him showing up unannounced. You told me your last name when we talked about hanging out. Don't you remember? I just looked up your parents' address in the phone book. I was at a loss for words. I still insist I never gave my last name, but somehow he got it. Him saying I did name even matter. There was no way I was going to let this dude gaslight me. I'd have enough of his games, and as calmly as possible, I told him to never contact me again and hung up. As far as I was concerned, it was over. Only after I calmed down that I began to wonder how he got my cell number. And this made me furious. So furious, I threw my phone against the wall as hard as I could in fury. And now that I think about it, it was probably the right idea. Christmas Day was spent with my parents and went by quite except for one creepy interruption. I'm not sure Daryl was involved, but it's highly likely. In the time we were sitting down for dinner, my parents' home phone rang. My mom answered it and said hello a number of times, but the caller didn't speak. My mom, being busy, shrugged her shoulders and hung up. My guard was up and considered the recent events. I figured it was Daryl trying to intimidate my family. Fortunately, I kept my family out of the business and they thought nothing of it. The subsequent incidents I was expecting never came, and the remainder of my time there went by smoothly. My last encounter with Dara was probably the creepiest of them all. The morning of the 27th was my final day in town. I was scheduled for an 11 a.m. flight. My dad and I were heading out at around 8, and I was standing next to the car giving my mom one last hug. I happened to glance over my shoulder and caught sight of someone standing behind a tree. They were about 50 yards away, but I could tell it was Daryl. It shocked me, but I was able to hide it from my parents. I insisted my dad we needed to go. There was no way for me to know what he had planned, but I had a hunch my presence was keeping him there, as we passed him a step behind the tree, but the tree was too small to conceal him, and our eyes met one another's, and I could see the hate seething from him. It was honestly one of the most surreal experiences of my entire life. My dad noticed at that point and made a comment about how lonely a crazy person would be out on 27-degree morning, and he had no idea how right he was. The flight home went out without a hitch. I was relieved to be back to somewhere I felt safe. The possibility of Daryl doing something to my parents stayed with me for several months, but things turned out to be just as I thought. I must have been the sole focus of his obsession or whatever you want to call it. There was always the worry that he'd show up in my apartment, but that never materialized, thank God. Work was awkward. With every call I expected to hear at Daryl on the other end, that too never occurred. And now that I'm working and living elsewhere, I'm not as worried. Nonetheless, I'm always aware of my surroundings. You can never be sure when your enemy may decide the time is right to pounce. It may all be a product of an overactive imagination, but I'd rather be safe and sorry. After all, I've got a family to worry about now. I don't know how long it has been since I got stuck in this basement. You may be thinking, who am I? And why am I stuck here? Well, I'm just an ordinary guy who is in love with this woman. Her name is Sarah. She's my best friend's wife. If I were to explain the whole incident in details, I would have to tell you the story from the beginning. This story starts when Sarah, Jack, and I were all friends and nobody had married anyone. Jack always had a crush on Sarah, and eventually they got into a relationship. At first, I did not have any romantic feelings towards Sarah, but one day the three of us went on a trip, and during that very trip, I fell in love with Sarah and ended up being obsessed with her. Let's start from the very beginning when I first saw Sarah. It was a day when Jack was talking about the new girl he had a crush on, and we were in the cafeteria to have some lunch. He was telling me that, you know the new girl that transferred, the one I have a crush on? She's just unbelievably nice. The other day I was walking past her classroom and I saw her helping a fellow student with her note, even though she's new. Hey, here she comes. That's the girl I was talking about. He pointed his finger towards the gate of the cafeteria, and I saw this tall girl walking by. She had a long, silky, straight hair that was red, and she had blue eyes. She was very thin for a girl, and she was in a tomboy attire. She didn't look that appealing to me, but I couldn't say anything to Jack because he was free to have a crush on anyone he wanted. Jack was a very socializing person, so he instantly called Sarah and asked her to have lunch with us. Hi, I'm Jack, and this is my friend Edmund. You are the new girl, right? Do you want to have lunch with us? As she came over to our seat, he started talking to her. She agreed, and while having lunch, we started talking. She wasn't that bad. We could be friends. That's what I thought. The three of us started to hang out together, and slowly we became good friends. Jack's crush started to grow, and one day he told me that he's falling in love with her. He asked me if he should confess to her. At the time, I was in support with Jack, so I told him, "Don't worry, dude, go ahead. I got your back." Jack smiled from my response. Of course, he was my best friend, and I would have always supported him. The next day, school had just started. That was when Jack walked in with Sarah in the class while holding hands. They told me that Jack confessed and they had started to date. Everything was normal except for the fact that Jack and Sarah were dating now. After about 6 months or so, we planned to go on a trip. It was supposed to be a camping trip. We took permission from our parents and started to prepare for the trip. After the preparations were complete, we headed out, and during the trip, Jack and Sarah started to argue for some reason, and even during the camping, they were not talking to each other. I woke up in the middle of the night and I was feeling uneasy, so I thought that I should take a walk. When I was walking, I saw Sarah sitting beside a tree and she was crying. I went ahead and started to console her, and she leaned her head over to my shoulder and continued crying. That was the first time when I looked at Sarah's blue eyes and they were red from crying. Her eyelashes were wet and her mascara had a smudge. I felt something in my heart. That was the first time when I thought that Sarah was the most beautiful woman in the world. After the thought crossed my mind, I instantly pulled myself away from Sarah and went inside my tent. That entire night I couldn't sleep. I was only thinking about her. The next day, Jack and Sarah made up, and she looked happy. Seeing her bright smile made my heart beat even faster than the last night. I couldn't help but feel jealous of Jack because Sarah chose him. But I did not want to hurt Jack, so I decided to never let anyone know. But my plan failed soon after, when I saw Jack and Sarah kissing. For some reason, I was so angry and jealous that I wanted to hurt Jack. But he was my best friend, so I gathered my thoughts and calmed myself down. A year went by, and it was finally the graduation day. Jack had decided to propose to Sarah after the graduation ceremony. For some reason, I was hoping that Sarah says no, but since Sarah was in love with him, she accepted. They married a month later, and I started to have anger issues. I got angry for every little thing. I would sometimes beat a complete stranger who had pissed me off. I could not gather the courage to attend their marriage ceremony. Instead, I was at my home drinking the entire time and thought that I had lost Sarah for life. But then a plan came to my mind. I thought, what if Sarah were to lose her husband? She would be devastated, and I would be the one to console her that night, and I would make her fall in love with me. I started to stalk them. Whenever Jack and Sarah both were together or were on a date, I would always follow them without letting them know. And when Sarah was alone and Jack was at work, I would watch Sarah. I memorized the entire routine. They used to go on Tuesday evenings for dinner dates and movies on Saturday. Apart from those days, Sarah was always alone at home, and I would watch her. After Jack left for work, she would do some house chores, laundry, etc. And when the housework was complete, she would open her laptop and start working on it. But one day, she decided to join a gym. On the third day of her gym, when she could not do pull-ups, her trainer grabbed her waist and made her do the entire set of pull-ups. I got furious from that. I thought even I never touched her, so how dare he grab her waist? Sarah left after working out, but I waited until the trainer left for his home. He was walking past an abandoned building when I hit his head with a big stone that I had grabbed before following him. He stumbled. That was when I hit him again on his head with the same stone. He fell. I continued hitting him while he was groaning from pain. I kept hitting him till he passed out. I was mad. I was furious by the fact that Sarah married Jack and then made love, and how Jack could touch her and kiss her whenever he wanted. I was furious that his trainer was able to grab her wrist when I never touched even her hands. After I finished hitting him, I checked, and he was dead. I had killed him, but I was not regretting it for some reason. That was when I thought, this is the perfect time for me to kill Jack. I followed Jack to his home when Sarah was in the bathroom. After Jack went inside his home, I rang the doorbell. Jack opened the door, and he looked happy to see me. "Buddy, long time no see. Come inside. Tell me, how are you doing?" Wait a second, let me grab the beer from the kitchen. As he was talking, I followed him to the kitchen and grabbed the knife from the counter. He was opening the fridge when I stabbed him in the back and kept stabbing. That was when I noticed the footsteps of Sarah coming toward the kitchen and immediately tried to hide myself. While I was hiding, I heard Sarah scream and then I heard her calling 911. When the police arrived, I wasn't able to get out of the house, so I somehow managed to hide in the basement. I don't know, I think a day had passed. I cannot figure out how long has it been since I got stuck here. I can hear the wailing sound, a police siren. I can hear that the search is going on. I guess they're trying to find evidences regarding the murder, and I have no idea if I will be able to get out of here or I will get caught. I was aware of the possibility of getting caught from the day I decided to kill Jack, and from the day I started stalking them. You guys may have heard about the story of Pinocchio, right? A puppet who was carved by a wood carver who came to life, and his nose grows longer every time he lies. But what about the Pinocchio roaming among us, whose nose doesn't grow when they lie? Some lies affect our lives so much that they can change the entire course. They might be someone in our family, relatives, between our friends, people who know us, or someone we trust in our lives. They know what they are doing, but they keep lying and lying until the subject of their lies destroys them. There are no growing noses, so we can't recognize them between crowds. The story I'm about to tell you is about how such a Pinocchio changed my life completely and made me lose trust in everyone around me. It was around the time when I moved back to Pennsylvania after my father's death. I used to live here till middle school, so the neighbor wasn't such a strange place to me. Yes, there had been a new addition to buildings and alleys, but besides the new construction, everything remained unchanged. That is if we don't add Miss Hilda, who must be in her 90s now. She still hasn't kicked the bucket though. My mom enrolled me in this new school that was around the neighborhood. I was always to go there once in my life when I was a kid, but now when I can go, I don't find it any special. Okay, so it was the first day of school when the teacher announced that I had transferred from New York University, and it became the topic of current gossip among students. I was approached by many students during break and lunchtime, but I preferred talking to the minimal, so after a few students tried to talk to me, I pretended as if I was sleeping on my bench. On the third day of school, the students' approach became less than before, and I was able to have my lunch in peace. But that was when I got, "Hey, you're a new student, right? I heard you transferred from New York University. These students must be giving you a hard time. By the way, I'm Emily. When I first transferred from St. Paul's Girls' School, I had to suffer the same kind of situation." A chatterbox appeared. "I'm Kate," I replied. I wanted to make my leave with my replies, but she was persistent. "Wow, they were right. You don't talk much," she said while taking a seat next to me. For the next 30 minutes, she continued to ramble beside me until the bell rang. I immediately got up and went to class. The next few hours were quiet as I continued to fully focus on my classes. The moment school was over, I packed my things and headed out of the classroom. As I was walking toward the school gate, I heard the familiar voice of Emily, but I chose to ignore it and strode forward. "Hey, Kate." I stopped as she held my bag while catching her breath. It looked like she ran after me. She walked to the gate with me and diverted my attention from the front when I bumped into someone. I looked forward while apologizing, only to see a guy smiling at me. "What are you still doing here, Caleb?" Emily asked while raising an eyebrow. But he ignored her question and continued to stare at me, which, trust me, felt pretty uncomfortable. "Who is she?" he asked without removing his gaze from me. "That's Kate. She's the new transfer student I told you about." She replied, but I could feel the discomfort in her voice. And trust me, I wanted to avoid both of them. So I told Emily that I was late and excused myself from the situation. After that day, the two of them continued bothering me and following me wherever I went, whether it was cafeteria, lunch, or even the library. I sometimes wondered if they ever attended their classes or not, looking at how they were always in the hallway when I got there. They even started to visit me in my class during break time, and eventually they started to grow on me, making me look forward to seeing them. I never knew when I first started to attend this school that I'd make such good friends this easily. Well, practically they forced themselves on me, but still, I became quite fond of them as time went by. One day, they asked if they could come over to my house on the weekend. At first, I hesitated to invite them over, but eventually I agreed. I never knew I would be, but surprisingly, I was looking forward to having them over. Guess this is what friendship does to you. I prepared snacks, drinks, games, etc. for them to enjoy. After that, I started waiting for them to arrive, and they got here about 5 in the evening. I first offered them some snacks and drinks, trying to be a good host as Google suggested, and then asked if they wanted to play some games, to which they agreed. "You're trying too hard," Caleb whispered in my ear as I sat on the couch near him. "What?" I stuttered because of the embarrassment of looking at how close he was. "About this whole good host thing. We didn't expect you to be perfect, so be cool, okay?" I nodded my head as he said that. That was when Emily asked me where the bathroom was, and I immediately got up to show her the guest bathroom near the stairs. After enjoying the evening together for a few hours, they said goodbye and left. Mom got back from work around 8 p.m., and she looked pretty tired, so I fixed her dinner. I also sat there with her to eat when the doorbell rang. "You eat, I'll get it." Mom was about to get up, so I told her and went to see who it was at this time. As I opened the door, I saw 2 officers in front of our house. "What is it, officers?" I asked. "Can we check your house for a minute? We heard someone around this neighborhood was doing drug dealings," one of them asked. I was surprised about that, but I let them in. They looked around the kitchen, around the living room for a brief moment, and then went straight to the guest bathroom. After looking for a few minutes, they came out and asked my mom to step out of the house for a minute, saying they needed to talk about something. But the moment she stepped outside, they arrested her, saying they found drugs in the guest bathroom. I pleaded with them not to take her, and it must be some misunderstanding because my mother and I never used that bathroom. But they didn't listen to me. They took her away. I broke down because I didn't have anyone besides her in the whole world, and I was crying, thinking about how this could have happened. But then it hit me. She was never home due to her work in the hospital as a nurse, and whenever she got back, she was so tired that I had to forcefully tuck her into bed as she used to fall asleep anywhere. The 2 of us had bathrooms in our rooms, so I never saw her using the one in the guest room. And there was only one person who did use that bathroom: Emily. The next day as I went to school, the news of my mom's arrest had already spread throughout the school, and I wasn't surprised by it either, looking at which liar might have done it. As Emily approached me cheerfully, I gave her a tight slap on the cheek, grabbing everyone's attention towards us. "Don't you dare act friendly with me. I know it was you who planted drugs in the bathroom," I said while gritting my teeth. "What are you talking about? Why would I?" she replied with a confused expression on her face, which I knew very well was fake. "Oh, let's see, because you were jealous of Caleb's flirting with me. Don't you dare approach me from now on, or I might break a leg or 2 of yours," I said and stomped away while I heard her say, "I swear it wasn't me." I stopped talking to both of them after that, and didn't make any more friends either. My mom's in jail for a few months, so I have to work part-time if I want her to get out on parole. But yeah, this entire experience taught me one thing: better watch out for the liars among us.
On the morning of Tuesday, September 20th of 1988, 19-year-old Tara Calico left her home in Belen, New Mexico to begin her daily bike ride along the New Mexico State Road. Cycling was her favorite form of exercise, and she chose a route she'd ridden every morning, without fail, for years by that point, and was often accompanied by her mother, Patty Dole. However, in recent weeks, Patty had ceased to join her daughter in her daily rides after one particularly frightening incident in which she believed the pair had been stalked by an angry motorist. Patty had implored her daughter to stop cycling at that time in the morning, or to at least take a different route, but her daughter rejected the idea and said her mother was overreacting when it was suggested that she carry mace. That Tuesday morning, Tara had noticed one of her hamstrings feeling a little tight. She mentioned this to her mother and added that if she wasn't home by 12, it was because she was probably injured, in which case her mother was to drive down the regular route to give her and her bike a ride back. We can also assume that Tara desperately wanted to be back around that time, as she had a date at around 12:30 and wanted time to get ready. And indeed, when Tara failed to return by noon, Patty drove down their usual cycling route, but couldn't locate her daughter. But what she did find were the broken pieces of what was unmistakably Tara's Sony Walkman. Patty immediately contacted the police, suggesting the broken pieces might represent some kind of trail for them to follow. Police did indeed follow the trail of broken plastic, but to no avail. Several witnesses were interviewed, each saying they had seen Tara riding her bike along the state road. One or two even added that they had noticed a light-colored pickup truck following closely behind her, but hadn't really thought anything of it at the time. Police cast a wide net in the search that followed, but not a single trace of Tara or her bicycle could be found. It was as if though she'd ridden into a black hole, like she just dropped off the face of the earth. Yet little did they know, they would be seeing Tara again. Only the circumstances in which they'd see her would be truly terrifying. On the evening of June 15th, 1989, a woman in Port St. Joe, Florida, stopped at a local convenience store. She pulled into a free parking space next to a large white windowless Toyota cargo van, and as she got out, noted that it was being driven by a mustachioed Caucasian man who appeared to be in his 30s. She then walked into the store, picked up a few choice items, then headed back out to her vehicle. The Toyota cargo van was gone, but lying in the empty parking spot was a small square Polaroid photograph. At first glance, the picture appeared to be of two people lying among some bedding, but on further inspection, the contents of the photograph made the woman's blood run cold. It showed a young boy of maybe only 7 or 8, along with a young woman in her late teens. Each appeared to have their wrists bound behind their backs with a strip of duct tape covering each of their mouths. She immediately contacted local law enforcement, who in turn set up roadblocks to intercept the vehicle. But the van was never found, and the driver never identified. Representatives from the Polaroid company offered to analyze the picture before informing police that the picture could have been taken no earlier than May of 1989, as the kind of material used to print the photo was not available until then. The Polaroid's discovery sparked a frenzy of interest in the national media, and Patty Dole was contacted by friends who believed the gagged girl looked an awful lot like Tara. The FBI then brought the photograph to Patty, who was then on convinced that the girl in the picture was her missing daughter. She cited the scar on the bound girl's leg, one that was identical to one Tara had received as a result of a car accident. Patty also noticed that a paperback copy of V.C. Andrews' novel My Sweet Adrena can be seen lying next to the girl, a book that just so happened to be Tara's all-time favorite. The United Kingdom's Scotland Yard analyzed the photo and conclusively agreed that the woman in the picture was indeed Tara, but a follow-up analysis by the Los Alamos National Laboratory disagreed, citing differences in the girl's facial structure. However, when the FBI conducted a third analysis of the photo, the results were inconclusive. They were 75% sure it was her, just enough to officially declare it, as it might muddy or misdirect any potential investigation. The other young person in the picture was thought to be young Michael Henley, also of New Mexico, who had disappeared just a few months before Tara had. Michael's mother said that she too was almost certain that it was her young son tied up in the Polaroid, Yet this is considered highly unlikely, as Michael's remains were discovered in June 1990 in the Zuni Mountains, less than 10 miles from the family's campsite he vanished from. Police believe that Michael simply wandered off and subsequently died of exposure, and if that were the case, there was no way the child in the van could be him. 2 other possible Polaroid photographs of Tara had surfaced in the years since her disappearance, the first being discovered near a construction site in the small town of Montecito, California. It is a blurry photo of a girl's face, with tape covering her mouth and light blue striped fabric behind her. Many have noted the blatant similarities between the fabric to that on the pillow in the Toyota van photo. It was taken on film that was not available until June 1989. The second Polaroid depicts a woman loosely bound in gauze. Her eyes are covered with yet more gauze and large black frame glasses, and she's standing with a male passenger beside her on an abandoned Amtrak train. The film used was not available until February 1990. Calico's mother believed the first was definitely Tara, with her sister saying that the 2 girls had a striking, uncalming resemblance. As for me, I will not rule them out. But keep in mind, our family has had to identify many other photographs, and all but those 3 were ruled out. Many years went by without any arrests or developments in the case. Then, in 2008, rumors spread that 2 teenage boys had accidentally hit Calico with a truck, panicked, and subsequently killed her, covering up their misdeeds by disposing of her corpse somewhere it'd never be found. But this was dismissed as pure hearsay, and the police officer who made the comment was publicly chastised by Tara's stepfather for them. 5 more years went by, and we could be forgiven for thinking that Tara's case would remain a cold one. But in 2013, the FBI announced that they had set up a 6-person task force that was to be charged with reinvestigating Tara's abduction, citing the discovery of new evidence. Then in 2019, the FBI followed up their announcement by offering a reward of up to $20,000 for precise details leading to the identification or location of Tara Lee Calico, and information leading to the arrest and conviction of those responsible for her disappearance. So it seems the FBI are creeping ever closer to finding the person responsible for Tara's death or abduction, and that even if 30 years goes by, the powers that be will not simply allow people to go missing without doing something about it. But the question remains, was it really a freak car accident that killed Tara? One in which a terrified teen found he couldn't face the consequences? Or was Tara kidnapped by someone with much more nefarious intentions? Someone who wanted to show off his monstrous labors by displaying his quarry, bound and gagged, his playthings until he saw fit to dispose of them. But at the end of the day, we're only left to wonder in horror at Tara's fate at the hands of her captor, left only to pray that the same thing doesn't happen to us or any of our loved ones.
About 8 years ago now, me and my dad and a few of my cousins were fishing down in southern Maryland one summer. We were out of the particular spot where there are these things called target ships. These are old decommissioned Navy ships that have been mounted on top of concrete pillars so they can float no matter how much the Navy tests munitions on them. They get shot at by all kinds of vehicles with all kinds of bullets, bombs, and missiles. But anyway, we're all on my dad's Grady White fishing for croaker and flounder right near these target ships. If they're actually being used for military exercises, you can't even get near them. So since there's no one out there to wave us away, we were out near the target ships with about 20 other boats in the water. But then, sure enough, about an hour and some guy from the Coast Guard sails up to us. They're on a big old CG boat with about 15 trainees on board, and the officer in command asks a favor from my dad. He wants to know if he can practice a little inspection drill with a few of his trainees. Being the good guy he is, my dad gives them permission, then renders them coming on board. I feel my rod getting all heavy all of a sudden. I call it out, and the Coast Guard officer stops his inspection and says, "Go ahead, son, reel it up. Let's see what you got." So I reel and reel, and it's really obvious how heavy whatever I've caught is, so naturally we're all getting mad excited. Then, to all of our absolute horror, I pull the thing from the water, and we all see that it is an unexploded bomb. It was a cylindrical diamond shape with neon green stabilizers, about 12 to 14 inches long and 4 inches in diameter at its thickest part. Well, now the officer, the trainee, and the entire boat of Coast Guard has just witnessed what I pulled out of the water. And I'm not kidding when I say that. I watched the color drain from all their faces. They went from pink, unhealthy, to skeletal white. And the time it took to say the trainee on our boat literally leaves to his boat, and they all haul it away with their sirens on. This leaves a very rattled Coast Guard officer on our boat, who promptly orders me to not move a single muscle. The Coast Guard gets on our VHF and tells all the boats in the area to leave the target ships. And I'm telling you, you ain't never seen fishing boats move so fast. After about 20 minutes of me sitting there with this bomb on my line, the area is finally cleared away. The officer orders my father to put his boat and drive to achieve a good bit of speed, and then don't stop. So my dad goes as he's ordered, puts the boat in gear, and seconds, we're rolling about 15 to 20 knots away from the ship. The absurd brings out a knife, cuts my line, and orders my dad to just throttle the boat and get away as fast as you can. Needless to say, it did not detonate when it hit the bottom of the bay. We took the officer, who was pretty clearly shaken, back to his ship. I know it's hard to believe the story without proof, but in the situation, we didn't have time to get a picture of it. We tried, but the Coast Guard officer was adamant about us getting out of there as quickly as possible. But take my word for it, it's easily the scariest thing I've ever had happen to me during a fishing trip. There was once this story about Pinocchio that a man wrote. It was one of the grittiest and most sadistic things that I have ever read. The story was definitely not the child-friendly Disney version of the Pinocchio, but it was rather a sadistic version of it. And then some often argue even that the sadistic story that I have heard is the real story and not the Disney one. Even though the Disney story is more hopeful and cheerful, there's definitely something about the sadistic story that is much more real, and the chances of it being closer to reality trumps over the chances of the Disney one being real. The story starts with a man who brought in a doll from a county fair and kept it in the basement of his house. It was said the man that bought the doll wasn't really stable when it came to everyday social situations. He was bit slowly when it came to things, and he was labeled a creep in the town. Kids of the town didn't really help by bullying him constantly, and because of that, the condition that he was in was even worse than it was before, and it made him more secluded from everyone else. It all spiraled to when the man was pushing into becoming a loner, and that is when he started this friendship with the dolls and started talking to them, and his parents did see that, and even tried to get him out talking and meeting people in real life, but he tried that before, and people were not ready to accept him out in the society, and then he became a complete shut-in. It was then that his conversations started out with the dolls that he was collecting. He would start talking to them in front of the people, but every other time he did talk to them. He must have been the college age when he started keeping those dolls, and it soon became something he did very often and became the collector of the creepy dolls. It wasn't until the late summer when things changed for him. It was the mid-1800s, and the time was much harder than it was today. So some people, while he was walking out with his dolls in his hands, he was crossing the river stream passing by, when some of the guys in his town saw him, and they decided to gang up on him and bully him. He wasn't sure what he did wrong, and there was nothing that he could even do to stop that feeling. So he just crawled himself into a hamster ball and got beaten by those guys from the town. He stayed there motionless as long as he could. He just wanted the guys to go away. And when they realized that he isn't really reacting to anything, they just left away, kicking his dolls. And as they did, a man in a suit picked up the doll and looked at it and asked him as he was lying down, "Now, young man, is this your friend?" And as the man looked up as he heard the word friend, he realized that the man was not a danger. And then he looked and just slightly nodded. The man in the suit said, "Well, young man, I'm going to pay you $1,000 for this doll and teach you how to make them if you wish so." The man had no idea about anything, and he just said yes and followed him. The man showed him around the factory, and that is where he learned how to make really amazing dolls, and he was especially interested in the ceramic dolls, and most importantly, was able to find a career out of this, and went on to manufacture dolls and became an integral part of the manufacturing company. And then one day, when he had enough money, he left the company, thanked the man for his help, and decided to open up a small workshop of his own in his basement, or even buy a warehouse. He later went on to establish a workshop of ceramic doll manufacturing in his basement, and then bought a warehouse, and that is how he started his own company of dolls. It had been 10 years since he had started this, and he even had the support of the man who gave him the job when he was found down beaten by the bullies. But even after becoming so successful and rich, it wasn't enough for the people to shut up, and they went on to bully him even then. And even after the success, the people of the town looked down at him, as he was the same old man who talked to the dolls in his basement. And the man this time seemed to take it quite well. He said nothing and did nothing about it, and just focused on his work. One day, while he was coming back from his workshop, one of the bullies who bullied him years ago was strolling around with his kid, and he decided to bully him again to impress his child. He took the doll from his hands, and the bully father told his son, "Be anything you like, but don't be this creep, all right, son?" And he snatched the doll from the hand of the man, and then stomped on it, breaking it, and then went on to beat the man. This time, the man was angry, and it was almost as if that he was done by all that bullying he had been going through, and he decided to do something so vigorous that it would make his bullies regret that they ever laid a hand on him. He was a man of money now and success, so getting things wasn't really something very difficult. So he did what he knew the best. He threw some money around and acquired the family information on all his bullies. And then, when he was done with it, he hired 3 muscles, really strong big guy that could not be challenged by any of his bullies, and then ordered them to kidnap the kids of every single bully that rattled him when he was a kid. They brought the kids to the warehouse, and then the man went on to carefully turn every kid into a ceramic doll, and he did carefully where the kids won't suffocate, but couldn't even do anything. He then wrote a letter to every single one of his bullies that he has made them dolls, and they surely must want. They came and they tried threatening the man, but he was now with the big muscles. Then he said to them, "You have been bullying me for my dolls, and now I am going to bully you for your dolls. Your kids have been carefully turned into dolls. If you want your dolls to be alive again, bring the deed to everything you own and name it to me." At first they didn't believe him, but then he brought out one of the dolls and then hammered it, and the king came out of it and started running to his father. And the man said, "Well, William wasn't too much of a bully, and to be honest, he is too poor. I cannot really get anything from him, so I am letting his kid go, just to set an example. So hurry up, guys. Bring in your deeds." They all were very helpless in that moment and went and brought in the deeds for their house, farm, cattle, or anything they owned. And the man was quite joyous to see that, and he took all the deeds and set them on fire, and then brought out the dolls and ordered the muscles to break them all carefully and said, "There you go. Make your dolls real. In December of last year, I realized that because of a promotion I'd received during the summer, I was able to afford a new apartment. My old apartment had a bunch of chronic problems with it, and half of them were the kind of thing that I might have picked up on should I have given it a proper inspection beforehand. So when it came to shopping around for a new place, I was beyond thorough when it came to the kind of research I put in. After I admitted to asking an estate agent how thick the apartment door was, a friend of mine would kind of get on my case and say no landlord is ever going to offer you a tenancy. And in a way, he was right. But I found my approach only put off the dodgy landlords, while the decent ones completely understood why I was asking so many questions. Which is why when I actually found somewhere I liked, it made the experience way more stressful than exciting. I was competing with over 100 other applicants for the tenancy. It was these huge western-facing windows on the second floor too, meaning you get some incredible sunsets along with great spots for houseplants. And the shower, oh my god, the shower. Built-in waterproof Bluetooth speakers, stream jets, UV lights to stop bacteria from going anywhere. Okay, I'll quit flexing about my shower. And spoilers, I got the flat. But it's not like it gives me much joy anymore anyway. None of those amenities do anymore. And the only thing I put myself paying any serious attention to is the living room ceiling. Weird picture, isn't it? A guy just sitting there, drinking coffee, eating dinner, eyes glued to the black-white plaster above him. And I catch myself doing it an awful lot. A disturbing amount, actually. And now, I'll tell you why. Like I said, everything about this flat seemed perfect, and for the most part it was. But literally 8 days after I move in, right while I'm sitting quite confidently that everything was in working order, stuff hits the fan. I'm sitting on the couch watching TV, and the rain is just pelting against the windows. This horrible, cold December rain, the kind that makes it a kind of thrill hearing pattering against the glass. So I'm just chilling when I hear this tapping sound coming from down the hallway. I don't really think anything of it at first, like it honestly sounded like someone in the hallway outside the flat. But after a while, I decide to investigate because the sound just isn't ceasing. As I walk into the hall, I can tell almost right away that the tapping sound is coming from my bathroom, and when I open the door, I'm faced with this steady leak coming from the air vent in the ceiling. Just 8 days in. 8 freaking days, and I have a leak. Yes, it's only a minor one, but as anyone who's dealt with leaking pipes or dodgy plumbing might tell you, even the slightest amount of water can be absolutely catastrophic if a leak isn't dealt with right away. The water might pool somewhere out of reach, rotting wood and causing that disgusting stagnant water smell. It can be a massive pain. So I'm kind of panicking, looking up the names of local plumbers, cursing the landlady's name all the while for not telling me if there were leaky pipes. It had been raining all day, so it could have easily been something to do with all the rain, but I had an entire 3rd floor above me. How was the roof drainage merging with the vents? And that's when I had my big brain, or not so big brain moment, and realized that it might well be coming from the flat upstairs. Maybe they left the bath running or something. I remember thinking it was annoying, but accidents happen. I run upstairs, knock on the door of the unit directly above me, but get nowhere. Then, making sure no one's around to watch me, I kneel down and put my ear to the keyhole. Decently enough, but try explaining that to some stranger with no context. I expected to maybe hear some running water, maybe even the sound of someone mopping up the overflowed bathwater. But nothing. It's just silence on the other side. Given that I can hardly go kicking the door in, I just go back to my flat, whack a mop bucket under the leak, then get on the phone with the landlady in case she had a plumber on retainer or something. Being the nice lady that she is, my landlady calls me back within minutes to let me know a plumber is on his way. But given that he was already at a job, I'd have to wait about an hour. No big drama. It was a manageable leak, for the time being anyway, but we'd still have to gain entry into the flat upstairs to make sure if it was the source of the whole thing. So I take it upon myself to walk back upstairs every so often to check if someone had returned home. At least, I presume they were out. There was no reason why they wouldn't just answer the door, right? I checked the first time. Then the second was maybe 50 minutes later. Then the third was just shy of 9 at night, like 20:57 on the dot. I remember because it was 15 minutes before the plumber was due to arrive, and I checked the clock just before making one final trip upstairs to check if the neighbors were home. Only when I get to the front door of the flat, which I'm 100% certain had been closed for the previous 2 calls, I can see that it's ever so slightly ajar. I'm certain someone is home by that point, so out of pure politeness, I get to the door a few loud knocks before shouting like, "Hello?" Expecting someone to appear any second, but again, there's no reply. But that time, I can definitely hear the sound of dripping water inside the apartment. So I go ahead and push the door open, seeing that almost the entire carpet is soaking wet. The flat is laid out exactly like mine, so I know the first room I'm going to encounter is the bathroom. The linoleum floor is flooded, the sink is flooded, but the taps are off. There's just a steady drip, drip, drip from one of them, like it hadn't been turned off all the way. When I call out to see if anyone's home, kind of worried I might be seen as rude for just sort of barging in. Yet I'm greeted by complete silence, just the sound of my own trainer squishing on the sodden carpet as I'm walking through the flat. If you're imagining this as being somewhat of a creepy scene, you'd be dead right. The closer I got to the living room, the more I realized that something might be terribly wrong there. And what do you know? There was. I think I knew she was dead from the moment I laid eyes on her. It was the awkward way she was lying there on the soaking wet floor with her eyelids kind of half closed. It's hard to describe, but I've never seen a person look like that. Like she was frozen in mid-blink or something. I just knew, you know? Like the gut reaction was so intense that I simply didn't need to check the girl's pulse. I didn't need to call out for her to wake up. I mean, I did just in case. Part of that gut reaction to death was wanting her to wake up. Pretty purely selfish reasons too, so I'd stop freaking out. But it was no good. She was gone. So I called 999. I tried some CPR and chest compressions as best as I could manage, but nothing would rouse her. It was the single most traumatic experience of my life, just splashing around in the half-flooded flat, begging the poor girl to wake up. All before the moment, I finally just sat on my butt and accepted that she was dead and there was nothing more I could do. I never cried like that before. I'm not ashamed to admit it, and I stayed sat there like that until I saw blue flashing lights in the window. At first, the police were brilliant. They came in my flat with me, made a note of the leak, telling me it was going to be okay and that I did everything right. I just sat there, nursing a cup of tea and telling them everything exactly as it happened. I remember touching on the whole fact that the door seemed to have spontaneously opened, meaning that at some point in the time between 2035 and 2057, either the victim or her killer had opened the flat's door for whatever reason. The 2 policemen shot each other this look that I misinterpreted as like an oof moment in retrospect. I think that was a sign of things to come. They definitely started by treating me like I was the poor innocent member of the public who happened to have stumbled across the tragic death of a young woman. But it didn't take long before they changed their attitude entirely. I got a call from a policeman calling himself D.I. Walker, who politely invited me to the local police station for further questioning. He assured me I wasn't in any trouble. They just wanted to go over a few details with me in light of new evidence that had emerged. It was an informal chat, no need for a solicitor or anything serious like that. So me being an absolute tool, I volunteered to talk to 2 murder police in an interview room with no one else present. They kept up the good cop routine for a while, going over my statement with me while buttering me up for trying the CPR. But a distinct change of tone came when one of the CID blokes asked me if I'd ever been up to the girl's apartment before the night in question. I told them now that I'd only been there for just over a week when the leak started, and as much as it makes me sound like a bit of a jerk, I'm just not the kind of guy to greet new neighbors with a freaking muffin basket or whatever. Then bizarrely, their follow-up question was if I knew anything about electricals, like if I've ever worked as an electrician or repaired appliances for a living. Again, I told them now, but it was my turn to ask a question. Mainly, why they asked me such an unexpected question. That's when they hit me with the fact that I was basically their number one suspect, and the way the guy said it was honestly horrific. Look mate, the thing is, we've come up against a bit of a brick wall here, and we're hoping you can help us out. We started off all friendly like we were old pals or something. You've given a brilliant statement here, and we're really grateful for you going into such detail and giving up your spare time. There's just one big problem. You said you knocked on the flat about 3 times between 8 and 9 o'clock. I wanted about 20 till and once just before 9. We got the time of death as being 8:45 at the very latest. So you're saying you didn't hear anything when you knocked the second time. Well, something is going on in the flat that causes the girl's death. I find that very confusing, don't you? I remember every word that he said, and I knew it wasn't even meant to be accusatory. I don't think, not overtly anyway, but I knew what they were getting at. They had to eliminate me as a suspect. But unfortunately for me, that was much easier said than done, because my fingerprints were everywhere, my clothes fibers were everywhere, and there wasn't a single witness of anyone else having visited that girl's flat that day. No one but me, by my own admission. It started to become obvious that the police actually had a suspect in mind, and it was me. Although I was never actually arrested in the weeks that followed, I had my flat searched twice, and police were almost constantly hanging around the building both flats were in. I noticed that they seemed to take particular interest in the building's wiring, and once or twice they seemed to be accompanied by some kind of tradesman, I'm guessing an electrician. And that's about the time I pieced together that the police thought the girl had died in some kind of freak electrical accident. Maybe a current had run through the flooding and just zapped it right there. But wouldn't that mean that I'd get electrocuted too? But that's just it. Despite the police refusing to tell me much about the investigation, I'm pretty sure they theorized that I'd somehow killed the girl using a jolt of electricity, which in my book showed how stumped they were for a legit theory. Don't get me wrong, the prospect of being the main suspect in the murder, getting a wrongful conviction or something, that's a terrifying thing for sure. But like I mentioned, I was never arrested, and after a while, the whole thing just went away. Naturally, I wanted to know everything the police knew concerning my neighbor's death. But after basically being accused of murder by one of them at one point, I wasn't all that keen on drawing any more attention to myself. What's clear is that I was just meters away from a murder I had no idea was happening, and that I'd only just missed whoever the killer was when they slipped out of the apartment and left the door open. But why would they leave the door open? I couldn't have known that there was a leak, so why not just close the door and roll out the possibility of someone stumbling across the murder scene? And what was the point of flooding the flat in the first place? It wasn't just the bathroom sink. The kitchen sink was overflowing too, but why? On top of that, I don't get the whole electrocution angle either. It seems like such an elaborate way to kill someone, flooding the apartment and then running a strong enough current through the water. And how would a person go about doing that remotely? Because they'd have to. Otherwise, they'd be killed too. Which leads me back to the question of who opened the door then? Was it some elaborate way of taking her own life and she wanted someone to find her before she went rotten? Too many questions. So are you all starting to understand why I spent an awful lot of time just staring at my ceiling? Now I can't seem to shake all the questions that have arisen since I moved in here. And what's worse, I'm kind of stuck here. Yeah, it's a nice place, but Jesus, it's tainted now. And it's going to take a long time before I'm going to feel normal again here. It's not like I have the money for a new deposit, and finding a place I actually like is tough going. And that's the gist of it, I suppose. I've been living under what feels like a tomb, and the mysteries of my neighbor's death have been keeping me up at night for freaking months now. I'd been very interested to hear other people's theories on this because, much like the police seem to be, I'm completely flummoxed as to what the explanation is. I mean, it's probably something perfectly rational, something tedious but tragic. But then again, sometimes my imagination starts taking over, and I start thinking that something entirely more sinister is to blame.
No movie will ever compare to the hell that I've gone through the last year. The ordeal seems like it's been one long waking nightmare. It all began normally enough. I just recently got out of a long-term relationship and wasn't looking for anything serious. I figured that I'd give Tinder a shot. It didn't take long for me to get a few matches. I chose the hottest one and we agreed to meet a week later. The date went so well that we decided to do it again, and this became a regular thing until the fourth date. It was beginning to look as if it may grow into something more in spite of my original intentions. As the fourth date wrapped up, I invited her back to my place for a drink. She agreed and things soon got hot and heavy, as they say. We were mere seconds away from taking things all the way when she broke down. I was confused. I'm not an aggressive partner and her behavior up to that point had been very receptive. I asked what was wrong and she said that she had been assaulted by a previous boyfriend. It had been several years and she thought that she had moved past it. I felt bad for her, yet still kind of frustrated, and she got up and dressed quickly. I'll admit it was, like I said, frustrating, but there was little I could do, and I understood where she was coming from. I called her an Uber and she left me with a difficult decision to make. After a long, sleepless night, I decided to just kind of end things there. Some of you reading this may call me cruel, but I couldn't really see another option. Things appeared to just be at an impasse, you know? I wasn't going to wait around until she determined that she was ready, and I sure wasn't going to pressure her into anything, obviously. I told myself that it was for the best. I'd never wanted to jump right into another relationship so quickly. That wouldn't benefit either of us, and I broke things off as kindly as I could. That night never came up. I stressed how I'd felt I'd rushed into things too quickly, and naturally she was a bit upset, but gave no indication of actually being angry. I wished her a happy future and just bid her a goodbye. And normally, that's where it would have ended. I took a month off from dating and Tinder and all that, and when I came back, I matched with a beautiful graduate student just looking to have a good time. This was more of what I was looking for. We met for drinks and hit it off. I went home happy with a spring in my step and a gleam in my eye, as they say. And maybe 2 days passed when I got a call from a neighbor. He informed me that there were leaflets posted all around our neighborhood, calling me an attempted predator. I thought this was his idea of some sick joke, and definitely not a good one. I laughed, but he assured me that this wasn't a laughing matter. I demanded proof, and a few minutes later he came to my door with a bright yellow piece of paper, and it claimed the following. On the night of Friday, November 19th, 2021, I was invited on a dinner date with Mr. My Name. After being plied with many glasses of wine, I was pressured into joining him at his home. Although I was clearly unable to consent, Mr. My Name attempted to coax me into his bed. When I refused his advances, he became enraged and threw me onto the street in the middle of the night. Please make sure all your female friends are made aware of the danger they may face by dating this manipulative monster. I can't begin to describe the anger that I felt in that moment. It was made worse when the neighbor asked me if it was true. Of course it wasn't, but when someone asks that type of question, it's a good indication that they believe it. Rather than strangle him, I did my best to assure him it was not. And his reception was less than convincing, but I had more pressing problems at that second. I had to get all those flyers, or whatever you call them, before any more impressionable idiots saw them. I spent most of the day pulling them from light poles and bulletin boards all over town. I'm still not sure if I got them all, and I counted over 200 when all was said and done. Then, out of nowhere, I discovered that I had been banned from Tinder after someone filed a complaint against me. My life felt like it was spiraling out of control, and I was desperate to stop it any way I could. What came next was probably the biggest mistake I'd made during this entire ordeal. I worked myself into such a muddle I did the one thing I shouldn't have. I contacted her via text message to confront her. She promised to retract her claims if I agreed to meet her face to face, and I took the bait like a sucker and drove to her house. We sat down at her kitchen table where she explained how hurt she felt. I wasn't interested in hearing any of it, but I was willing to suffer to save my good name. While she did so, she kept a glass of wine close at hand. She had clearly been drinking even before I arrived. After an hour, everything appeared to be handled. As I prepared to leave, she began coming on to me, and I mean in a very obvious manner, and I almost gave in, but then I remembered our previous problem and I shut her down. She was not pleased. She hissed and walked off toward the kitchen. I figured that she was getting some more wine, and it seemed like a great time to sneak away. I was putting on my jacket when a crash came from the kitchen. I hurried in to see what the matter was and was met by a shrill screeching. She rushed towards me with the stem of a broken wine glass and stabbed me with it. She retracted the jagged stem from the wound and snarled like some freaking animal. I was in shock, and I froze for a brief moment, unsure of how to react. Then she lunged at me again, just missing, and I took off. She pursued me out to my car and pounded on it as I sped off, and I just drove straight to the hospital, calling 911 as I drove. I informed the dispatcher which hospital I could be found at if the police needed to speak to me, and sure enough, an officer arrived as I was being treated for my injury. Luckily for me, she hadn't hit any major arteries or organs or anything like that, and the cop let me know that my assailant had been arrested, but what came next was a complete surprise. I was shocked to learn that she had a previous conviction for stalking and assault, and I surmised that it was a similar situation. Monday came around, and despite what I had hoped, my attacker was given bail. She paid and was out in time for dinner. I was furious and gave the assistant DA a piece of my mind, and while I waited for the trial day to arrive, I remained in a constant state of fear. I could swear that I saw her once or twice over that period, but I was in such a frazzled state that it was possibly my imagination. She became all I thought about. My work suffered. Even in my dreams, she often took center stage. She refused several plea deals and insisted the jury would acquit her. I know it was all a stall tactic, and she was assembling all the elements that she would need to what I thought would be to disappear. And the first rumblings began during jury selection. She had not been present for the procedure. Although she wasn't required to be, it didn't bode well. Then when the trial began in earnest, her lawyer was finally forced to admit that he had lost contact with his client several weeks prior. Now today is October 28th as I write this, and she's been missing almost 2 months. I sit around wondering what my future may hold. Hopefully she's done the wise thing and is currently laying low halfway around the world, or something. On the surface that appears to be the case, yet for some reason I'm not totally convinced. My former love interest is a highly successful and intelligent woman. It's largely what drew her to me from the beginning. I have a creeping suspicion that she may be focusing her vast resources into getting back at me. Whatever form that may take, I'm not really sure. Naturally, I fear she'll go to the conventional route and just end my life, likely by her own hand, maybe another stabbing. However, she is more than capable to go even further and extend my suffering indefinitely. And this is why I'm going to all the trouble to post my side of the story. I'm well aware I probably come off as a jerk in some circumstances, but I don't care. I just want a record of the truth to be available publicly should I disappear. My lawyer also has a copy in case I'm no longer around to testify on my own behalf. It's doubtless that law enforcement will eventually catch up with her at some point. I'm concerned it will be too late for me, though. So if you learn of the death or a disappearance of some unknown New York State attorney through the media, please remember what you read here.
Yes, I've actually had a stalker. And I'm one of the rare and unfortunate male victims of what legally is known as a fixated person. It all began when I first started my career as a radio DJ whilst in my early 20s. It was only for a local radio station that covered my home city and the surrounding area, so the show I ran wasn't nearly as widely received as national or digital stations, but we still got a couple of 100,000 listeners a day. And let me tell you, that was still a rush knowing so many people could hear my voice. Like most radio stations, we ran a lot of phone-in style segments and competitions for our listeners. And it was through interacting with the public that I came to earn myself a few regular callers. Not quite people are called fans, since saying that about myself is way too cringy, but they were definitely people we relished talking to, since they generated such excellent content. For example, there was this one older black lady, Phyllis. She had to be in her 60s or 70s. We got talking about how she was never married, a little playful flirting ensued, and before I know it, the segment is going viral on social media and beyond. I have to admit, the segments were hilarious, and for the most part, I enjoyed my interactions with our callers. But there was one girl who reminded me that being in the public eye, or ear in my case, can have some serious drawbacks. The girl only ever called in to try and talk to me, interrupting competitions or calling events, and generally making a nuisance of herself. We started screening her calls, but she just found ways to call from different numbers using a different name, and sometimes a different voice, so she'd be able to get through undetected. It got to the stage where our producer actually took over one of our calls off air, warning her that we'd ever charge with harassment if she didn't stop calling. That kind of worked, but it also kind of really didn't too. She stopped calling alright, but instead she started showing up in the parking lot and trying to talk to me after I got off work. She tracked me down at public appearances, caused all kinds of beef on her social media pages, and even picketed the entrance of the station, telling everyone who passed what a-holes we were. Over time, her behavior went from innocent but irritating to outright vicious. She was not happy that we'd banned her from calling it, but instead of blaming the producer, everything involved the show was his call, and his alone. She blamed me. She was so mad about it too. I'm talking frighteningly irate, and as soon as my producer heard about it, he pretty much marched me down to the police department to file a complaint. He had 30 years of experience. He'd dealt with people stalking his DJs before, and it was honestly chilling when he said something along the lines of, "Look, either you deal with us now, or it gets worse and worse until she eventually murders you. And since I don't have the time or the emotional capacity for that, we're going to the cops." I figured I'd be a relatively short and simple process of filing a report, maybe a court date to file a restraining order or something. But as soon as we mentioned who the stalker was, the cops taking our statement looked up as if the name was familiar to him. My producer straight up asked him if she was involved with stalking prior to myself, and although he didn't give us a concrete answer, telling us that he'd put us in touch with a couple of detectives ASAP. That spoke volumes. The next day, I get a call from the detective telling me he was from something called the FTA, or the Fixated Threat Assessment Department. Basically the cops who deal with stalkers before they work themselves up to actually hurting their victims. And these guys had dealt with my stalker on a number of previous occasions. In fact, she was something of a regular customer of theirs, and they had some very, very bad news for me. Some stalkers remain a benign irritation for their victims, too obsessed to not let go, but too shy to actually act on their fixation. My stalker was not one of those. She had a distinct pattern to her behavior, and that consisted of her getting very violent very quickly. She managed to avoid outright incarceration because most of the crimes she committed were low-level property damage or theft, but she definitely had a potential for actual body harm. One of her victims was subject to an attack which she tried to spray industrial-strength solvent into the guy's eyes. I'm not sure how much permanent damage that would have done, but there was a clear intention to take his sight away from him for good. That's when I actually started to get scared. She was smaller than me, weaker than me, probably slower than me, but she still presented an actual risk. I couldn't remain vigilant and protect myself 24/7. And if I wanted to remain working on a public platform, I was just going to have to man up and accept the certain risks came with that. Came to the decision, and I wasn't going to squander my radio career just because of one crazy. It had been my absolute dream since I was old enough to work the dials on my dad's car stereo. It was a hell worth dying on, even if the metaphor might someday turn literal. At that point, I got back in touch with the FTA cop to find out what came next. The one thing she didn't know about me was where I lived, and I intended to keep it that way. And what came next was like something out of a spy novel. A plainclothes cop came over to my apartment to teach me what amounted to counter surveillance. It was all stuff you might imagine, varying my routines home from work, making random turns and doubling back on myself, varying my schedule so a person wouldn't be able to track me by my schedule. Basically, I had to break up any kinds of patterns in my life. I know that doesn't sound like much, but trust me, try planning your entire life around a violent stalker for 3 months. You'll see what it does. The lack of actual control over everything feels like something I said or did might be compromised, or how the toxicity of it seeped into my interpersonal relationships, how it made having any kind of romantic life completely impossible. It doesn't feel so bad at first. The problem is, it creeps up on you. You don't even know the stress is there until one day you wake up to an extremely painful rash on your rib cage. One so painful, you need actual opioid painkillers to deal with stress-induced shingles, my doctor called it, and asked me if I had anything weighing on my mind. The question was so on the nose that I actually laughed a bit before I answered. Thankfully, she never did figure out where I lived that one day. It just kind of stopped. No more following, no more phone calls, no more anything. Apparently, a radio station across town had hired a new guy, and she became fixated on him once I called and gave him a friendly heads up. Basically giving them the same advice my producer gave me. Look, either you deal with this now, or it gets worse and worse until she eventually murders you. And since I don't have the time or the emotional capacity for that, we're going to the cops.
On September 24th of 1991, Seattle grunge titans Nirvana released their most successful album to date, entitled Nevermind. Perhaps most famous for the hit single Smells Like Teen Spirit, the album showcased how the band's loud, raucous sound, when combined with Kurt Cobain's signature melancholic songwriting, could produce some of the catchiest but most jarring songs ever recorded. However, the sixth track on the album, simply titled Polly, has a distinctly different sound to the other songs on the album. Instead of a cacophony of power chords, the track features a lone acoustic guitar that is occasionally accompanied by the lone, gentle hiss of a cymbal. And the reason for such a bare-bones approach might well be down to the song's lyrical content. Let's take a look at the first few lines. Polly wants a cracker. I think I should get off her first. I think she wants some water to put out the blowtorch. The bizarre references to parrots and welding equipment might seem confusingly cryptic at first, but there is most definitely a method to Cobain's lyrical madness. You see, he was inspired to write the lyrics to Polly after hearing of a horrific incident of kidnap and torture, which took place in his home state of Washington. On a night in June of 1987, a man named Gerald Arthur Friend of Lakewood, Washington, was cruising the streets of Tacoma when he noticed a large gathering of teenagers, having apparently just departed a nearby rock concert. Gerald waited until one of the girls was isolated, then cruised up to her, rolled down his window, and asked if she needed a ride home. There's no telling how reluctant she was to get into the vehicle, but we know that at some point, she asked to be let out and Gerald refused her. When she began to panic and made attempts to flee the vehicle, Gerald pulled out a knife and told her she'd be killed if she made any more attempts to escape. Upon arriving back at his mobile home in Lakewood, Gerald dragged the girl from his car, tied her up, then suspended her from a pulley system he drilled into the ceiling of his home. Then, For the following few hours, he proceeded to blindfold her, violate her, and torture her with household items, including, just as the song states, a blowtorch. There's no telling exactly what else Gerald put the girl through, as her identity was kept secret, and whatever statements she made to the cops were mostly forbidden from public release. But we can be certain that by the time Gerald seemed to get bored of her, the girl was convinced that she was about to be killed. Gerald pulled her down from the ceiling, untied her, then dragged her out to his car again. The girl apparently lulled him into a false sense of security, acting as though she were catatonic, or at least too frightened to resist any further. But then, while passing a gas station near Puyallup, she burst into action, opening the car's door, diving out, then tucking and rolling to absorb the impact of the fall. Gerald was apparently stunned by this display of bravery and guile, and by the time he turned around to go back to look for her, the girl was long gone. This miraculous escape was then immortalized in the Nirvana song line of "She caught me off my guard, amazes me the will of instinct." Despite being in severe pain from several rather serious injuries, the girl ran to the gas station and screamed for the clerk to call 911. Gerald saw this, realized it was him that was now in extreme danger, then burned rubber all the way back to his mobile home, where he grabbed a few essentials, then went on the run. The next day, it was by pure happenstance that a Yakima County Sheriff's deputy ended up pulling Gerald over for a basic traffic violation. Gerald thought he might be in the clear, given that the girl didn't know his name, and since she had been mostly blindfolded, he believed there was no way she could lead the police back to his home. On the contrary, the girl had been peeking through a small gap in her blindfold and had gathered enough information for her to work out where she was. The cops knew Gerald's name, and when the sheriff's deputy ran it through the system, the game was up. In the end, Gerald Friend was convicted of his heinous crimes and was sentenced to 75 years in a federal correctional facility. We can hope that his victim has long since moved on from the incident and is leading a somewhat normal life. And at the same time, we can also hope that a monster like Gerald remains in prison until the day he dies. But long after his soul departs the earth, the song Polly will continue to be listened to by those who discovered Nirvana's music, meaning that Gerald Friend's horrendous crimes will live on for as long as the song exists.
This happened when my sister and I were about 6 and 8. We are now 43 and 45, me being the eldest. And it is something that still haunts us occasionally. We had an amazing municipal swimming pool in our neighborhood. South Africa summers in Johannesburg are hot and long, so the swimming pool was the ultimate destination. Joe was the adult that was always at the pool. He would swim lengths, practice diving, and tickle our feet under the water. Just typing this makes me feel nauseous. To this day, I still have issues with my feet being wet. Specifically, I am unable to leave cream on my feet. The sliminess makes me claustrophobic. I only realized the connection last year. Whenever we would sit on the edge of the pool with our feet hanging in, he would swim past all of us and tickle all our feet in a row. Now, I can't remember all the details, but someone playfully screamed, "Oh no, Joe!" And Joe did it again and sang, "Oh no, Joe, not again, Joe." We laughed as kids do. Then he tickled our feet again and made us sing his new song. "Oh no, Joe, not again, Joe." It became a game. He would grab us under the water and we would sing. It went from feet tickling to chasing us and grabbing our waists under the water. The song never went away. One day at the pool, Joe told us that he had this amazing farm just out of town, and he would like to take us to see his animals, his mealies, which is corn, and his own swimming pool. It sounded like heaven to all of us. He was talking to several children, boys and girls, and he told us to be at the swimming pool on Saturday, but not to tell our parents. We will go in his car. As soon as we got home though, we told our dad everything as we were so excited and the farm sounded amazing. Our dad said absolutely not and asked who this Joe was anyway. We told him that he was our friend at the pool and he plays with our feet and chases us around the pool. My dad said that actually maybe we could go and he wanted to meet Joe first. Yay! The next day we went to the pool and we told Joe that we could go with him, but our dad wanted to meet him first. Joe was upset that we told our dad, but we said not to worry, our dad's cool. So Joe walked home with us. We only live about 5 blocks from the pool and came to meet our dad. Now Joe is about 5'6" and my dad is 6'7", the personification of a gentle giant. My dad was very polite to Joe and asked him loads of questions about the farm. Where is it exactly? How many kids are going? Has he spoken to other parents? Joe was cool as a cucumber. He answered the questions smoothly and confidently, and my dad ended by saying to Joe that he looked forward to seeing him at his farm on Saturday. I think we will have a great time. I'll bring my girls though, and we will meet you there. Now the next part is a bit of a blur to me. I'm not sure how we ended up driving in convoy with about 3 other dads and their kids from the pool, but it was so exciting. My dad had the map book leading the convoy to the best farm in the world. We drove about an hour out of town when we arrived at a derelict farmhouse. No animals, no mallees, no swimming pools. Just this run-down, isolated, scary-looking farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. I remember being really confused. My dad must have read the map book wrong. All the dads then huddled together, and we had no idea what they were saying, but they were really angry. We were angry too, as we were obviously lost, and it was the dad's fault. Everyone got back in their cars, and I started screaming at my dad about how he'd deliberately gotten us lost because he doesn't like Joe, and he didn't want us to have fun. My dad was silent and pensive, and after my tantrum, he said to my sister and I in a very calm, deep voice, "Joe is a bad man. He was going to hurt all of you. He is the bad man your mom is always warning you about. My mom is obsessed with true crime. There is no farm, and I'm so happy you girls told me what was going on because something bad could have happened to you." His strong voice broke in the last word. The gravity of his tone and the break in his voice made my sister and I realize immediately that he was right, and we were in danger. We cried and apologized, and he made us promise to tell him if we ever saw Joe again. Joe stayed away from the pool for about a month, but as soon as we saw him come through the gate, we quickly got dressed and ran home. When my dad came home from golf, we told him Joe was at the pool again. Then the next day we went to the pool with our dad. We were swimming, and my dad was sitting on one of the benches to the side. In walks Joe. He came to the edge of the pool and was calling to us. We refused to go to the edge, and he was getting frustrated. My dad then got up and walked over to him. "Hey buddy, can I have a chat with you outside real quick?" Joe physically shrunk. My dad had his hand on Joe's shoulder and was guiding him out to the pool. I can only imagine what my dad did and said to him. My dad is a gentleman, but don't mess with his girls. Joe was never seen again at our swimming pool.
I'm going to take you back a few years to when I was working at McDonald's. For context at the time, I was a 16-year-old female. Now at the McDonald's I worked at, when you are on headset, you answer people at the drive-thru. You are normally required to be at the first window to also take payment. My job position was customer care manager at the time, so my job was to be on the front desk, but 99% of the time, they required me to be behind tills. So I was having a normal day, working a long shift, but having a normal work day. I happened to be on headset, and first window that day too. My headset buzzes, letting me know there's someone at my drive-thru lane. I go through to the first window to answer my customer, and this is how the conversation ensued. "Hello, welcome to McDonald's, what can I get you?" "Oh wow, you got a beautiful voice." His voice was grunty and husky sounding, not off-putting. We have all sorts of customers come through McDonald's every day, so it didn't give me the creeps or anything. "Thank you, sir, how very flattering. What can I get you?" "I haven't decided yet." There's a long pause here. "Can I come to the first window to decide? I want to see who I'm talking to." Now, we weren't very busy at this point. The creeper hadn't actually creeped me out. I mean, all he'd done was pay me a compliment, and we quite often had people complaining that they preferred face-to-face contact, so this certainly wasn't out of the blue or unusual. "Yeah, sure sir, that's fine." "Wow, you're as beautiful as you sound." "Thank you sir. Have you decided what you're going to order? Are you an option?" I laughed nervously at this. It was my first job, and I wasn't the rude kind of person where someone was paying me a compliment. I must also point out this guy must have been in at least his 60s. I remember he had one lazy eye that looked to the left, painfully awful teeth, and patchy dark brown hair. At this point, I was a little bit uncomfortable, but was still more than willing to take his order. "I'll have a cheeseburger." "Okay sir, that'll be 99p. Are you paying cash or card?" Without answering my question, he started asking me where I'm from, how old I was, etc. But it wasn't until his last question that I got super weirded out. "What time do you finish work?" 7:30, why? I didn't actually finish at 7:30, but 7:30 was the first number that came into my head when I blurted it out. I finished at 8 and would probably do some overtime too, but I wasn't about to let him know that. "I can meet you if you want. I can pick you up outside and we can go somewhere." All the while he's saying this, he has this horrendous grin on his face and keeps winking at me. "I'm really sorry, sir. I'm not allowed to meet customers outside of work. It's against employee policy." This was utter bull, but I needed him to leave me alone, and he carries on being insistent, but not getting the picture, and I cut the conversation short. "Anyway, sir, sorry to be rude, but can I have the 99p for your cheeseburger?" "Ah, yes, sorry. See you at 7:30. Off he drove to the next window, and I was gobsmacked. I'd already said I wasn't going to see him. I was a little bit shocked, but was not going over there to give him the satisfaction of talking to me again. My coworker came to me and said, "Ew, that guy had a major crush on you. I wanted your number, but I didn't give it to him. He's old enough to be your dad, if not older." Anyway, I explained exactly what happened and how uncomfortable it made me. 7:30 came around and my coworker spooked. The creeper was actually waiting in the car park for me, just like he said he would. He sat halfway down the car park, and you could see him just staring in. Our car park wasn't very big. It only had 4 rows of parking spaces, so he wasn't that far away, and would have clocked me the minute I walked out the door. At this point, I'm freaking out, and head to the back of the store where hopefully he can't see me. I had to stay in the back of the store for 40 minutes before we knew it was safe to come out. Fast forward a week and Creeper is back on drive-thru, and guess who's back on headset at window 1? Me. I heard his voice and recognized it straight away. "I was hoping I'd hear your voice again. Why didn't you meet me the other day?" 1 second, sir. I'll be with you in 1 second. I immediately handed my headset to my manager and gave him a quick briefing of the situation. He gladly took the headset and dealt with the customer from start to finish. When my manager came back to me to let me know he'd gone, he said the creeper had been asking my name, my address, and my surname. My manager said he was the most creepiest guy he'd ever met, and I was never to have anything to do with him again. If he came back to work while I was there afterwards, my manager would have to head me to the back room while he dealt with him. He still asked about me every time. So to the creepy McDonald's guy, let's never meet again.
Back when I was pursuing my PhD in zoology at the UL Lafayette, I chose to write my thesis on the life cycle of biology of the alligator snapping turtle. This meant I spent an awful lot of time out at the Atchafalaya National Wildlife Refuge, a 1.5 million acre area of hardwood swamps, lakes, and bayous about 30 miles west of Baton Rouge. It's a truly beautiful and awe-inspiring place, but it's wild. One of those areas out in the country that has barely been conquered by humanity. And coming from Chicago, I'd never seen anything quite like it. But as much as I had come to love Atchafalaya, I had one of the worst experiences of my entire life whilst lost in the swamps there. An incident so intensely terrifying that I had to put my studies on pause for a matter of months in order to recover. I've decided to write down what I went through as a form of cognitive behavioral therapy in the hopes that it will help me deal with some of the unresolved traumas that followed me out of the swamps. Whether or not it will actually help, I can't tell just yet, but I sincerely hope it does, as frankly, I've been unable to be completely happy or content in myself since it happened. So without further ado, this is my story. It all started the morning my research partner and I were supposed to drive out to Atchafalaya for a long day of study and observation. The weather had been absolutely abominable over the previous few weeks, and we picked a time during what appeared to be a brief break in the rainy season. It might be the only period for weeks where it would be feasible to undertake such a research trip, but in the morning we were due to depart, I awoke to a text message saying he was feeling severely under the weather. He apologized, but told me that he wouldn't be able to accompany me. I was disappointed in the extreme, but like I said, the following few days looked like they would be the only time I'd be able to get a sizable chunk of research completed. So as foolish as it was, I loaded up my gear into my car and drove out into the swamps, alone. I drove out to the small town of Plaquemine, just on the edge of Atchafalaya, parking up near a small mom-and-pop joint to get some griots and grits before my hike into the swamps. I was in a pretty bad mood marching in there alone, and I had to carry a little extra equipment since I couldn't spread the load with my research partner. This made the walk out to my preferred observation spot much more tiring than usual. I mean, it's crazy how just a little extra weight can make a long hike like that seem harder. But anyway, I'm on my way out to a place called Upper Flat, a big stretch of water near Little Tensaw Bayou, when all of a sudden, I started realizing that I don't recognize any of the terrain. This was weird, as I'd made this journey like at least 50 times before, too many to really keep track of, but I figured I've only strayed just a little off course and I could find my way back onto my regular trail in no time. It was just a case of finding out which direction I'd move off in and making the appropriate course correction. Only when I get my compass out, I see the little needle spinning around wildly, like whirling around in a circle like it was being propelled by something. I give it a little tap, shaking it up, but it carries on doing exactly the same thing. It's not like it was a cheap compass either. It was a Suunto KB14, and there's some of the best compasses on the market. That one in particular set me back almost $200, so I fall back on the compass on my iPhone, which is even less reliable but works off a GPS as opposed to the Earth's natural magnetic forces. But again, not only does it refuse to calibrate, but I realize I have absolutely no bars on my phone either. That was definitely not normal. The cell reception isn't the best out there, but I always get something, even if it's just a single bar to send texts. I'm a little worried by that point, as I've basically got no method of reaching the outside world if something goes wrong. But it's either push on and get my day's research done, or walk back the way I came and face messing up my entire thesis. And I don't even know if the way I came will even take me back to Plaquemine by that point. So, I foolishly decide it would be better to push on as opposed to turn back, one of the single biggest mistakes of my life. So I'm walking for like another hour or so, hopelessly lost in a place I somehow barely recognize when I begin to smell smoke coming through the trees. I figured it's some campers or hunters out there, which would be highly unusual for the wet season, but at least they'd be able to point me back in the direction of Upper Flat. I follow my nose as the smoky smell gets more and more intense, until I start to see the smoke itself wafting through the trees. That's also about the time I begin to hear the slow, rhythmic sounds of a banjo being plucked, just out of sight. It's not some jolly Cajun tune either. The sounds are discordant, ominous even, and the hairs on the back of my neck begin to stand on end as I finally begin to see this little wooden shack coming into view. I can see the campfire by that point, and the sounds of the banjo are floating out of a small window in the shack. I'm nervous, but I speak up anyway, calling out hello and asking if anyone is home, even though I knew well that there is. I was just trying to be polite, you know. This angry-looking face appears in the window in an instant, a face I'll never forget. This guy's skin looked like leather, all wrinkled and cracked, while the darkest eyes I'd ever seen started around from sunken eye sockets. He had a beard and mustache, but it was all dark, ratty, patchy hair that made him look more like a kind of vermin than a man. There was some rustling from inside before the guy stumbled out from the shack's door, staring at me from the wooden steps. I apologized for my intrusion, then asked him if he knew which direction I could find Upper Flat. He didn't say a word at first, just carried on staring at me like I was somewhere I didn't belong, which I suppose was exactly the case. I then took to reassuring him that I didn't want to take up any of his time, that I was a little lost and all I wanted was to find my way back towards Little Tensaw. Petit Tensaw? He replied, in a drawl of Cajun French. Oui. Parlez-vous anglais? I had picked up a little French since moving to Louisiana for school, but I'm not about to pretend it was any good. The man just shook his head and then said something that sounded like a question that included the word traiteur. For those of you that don't know, in Louisiana, a traiteur is what they call someone who practices so-called faith healing, and whose primary method of treatment involves what's known on as kind of a laying on of hands, so to speak. An important part of Creole and Cajun folk religion, the traiteur combines Catholic prayer, medicinal remedies, and occasionally voodoo rituals. Or at least I thought they did. I genuinely didn't think that there were any traiteurs left, assuming the practice had long died out, yet apparently not. Traiteur comme, voodoo? No? I asked with a chuckle in my terrible French, trying to be as disarming as possible as to not irritate the man any further. He didn't laugh. He didn't smile. He just got mad. Really, really mad. He started growling things in French I didn't understand, pointing at me accusatorily as he seemed to get angrier and angrier. I started to back off slowly at that point, hands raised in the air as if to say, I don't want any trouble. But somehow that just makes him even more irate. And then he's sort of apoplectic with rage as he pulls this huge gator jawbone knife from behind his back and starts pointing it directly at me. A knife on its own would have been intimidating enough, but seeing the blunted alligator teeth that made up the handle, Jesus, that's just about scared the life out of me. I thought once I was out of there I'd be okay, but as I'm walking back through the forest, pretty shaken up, he starts screaming in French and whistling. Only when I look over my shoulder just to make sure he's not about to give chase, I notice something that makes my blood run cold. He's not screaming at my back. He's not whistling at me either. He's screaming and whistling into the forest. It didn't quite hit me at first. I just peered over the back of my shoulder wondering what he was doing, but then I realized he was calling others, telling them there was an intruder or whatever. I tried to move as quickly as I could without running. Don't get me wrong, I was absolutely terrified, but the bayou is not a place to go blindly sprinting among the greenery. Aside from gators and occasional cougar sightings, Louisiana is home to the cottonmouth snake. Although it's not outright deadly, their venom contains an anticoagulant, meaning the wound won't clot. Cottonmouth bites have been known to be fatal and without treatment, certainly require amputation. So, I'm sort of jogging and bounding my way from the shack as fast as I can, keeping my eyes on the ground so I don't get myself bitten. I go for about 20 minutes or so until I'm happy I'm far enough away from that angry Cajun to resume my walking pace. I felt exhaustion setting in at that point too. I'm sweating through my clothes and I am completely and utterly lost. My compass and phone still aren't working at all, and the further I walk, the more I'm panicking that I'm not going to be able to get out of the swamps by sundown, in which case I would be really screwed. But just as I'm starting to feel relatively safe, I hear something like a twig snapping behind me, before I get this horrible feeling in my gut like someone is actually following me. I do a quick 360, making sure I can't see anyone, which I don't. The bayou seemed as still and quiet as ever, yet the feeling didn't abate. I'm still convinced that someone is out there just beyond my vision, watching me with unseen eyes. I start moving more quickly again, bounding through the trees until I'm almost certain I can hear the sounds of a car driving in the distance. I was close to road, I was sure of it. But right as I start to move off in the direction of the sound, someone steps out from a tree just to the side of me. They were dressed in all black, bare-chested with red-brown skin that was riddled with strange-looking tattoos. Over their face was a mask that looked an awful lot like the front section of a human skull, and in their hand was a huge black blade of some kind. To this day, I have never seen anything as completely and utterly terrifying as whoever or whatever walked out from behind that tree. Whether or not they intended to do me harm or just scare me out of the area, I can't really say for certain. But I sure didn't want to wait to find out. I forgot about the cottonmouths and just ran as fast as I could, sprinting through the trees as I heard the guy following me. It was horrifying. I could hear him panting just a few meters behind me, the whole way until I burst through this thick patch of bushes and onto the highway behind it. I ran out in front of a car which almost smashed into me, honking its horn with the driver going crazy. I ran around to the guy's driver's window and begged him to let me in. At first, he told me to screw off and almost drove off on me. But I begged the guy. I really begged. And I don't know if it was how haggard I looked or if it was the genuine terror in my voice, but eventually he agreed to let me in. I told him what went back down in that bayou, and I asked him if he'd ever seen or heard anything like that. He told me no, but also mentioned that he knew way better than to be walking around the bayou on his own like that, and that I was an idiot for doing it. He was kind enough to drive me back over to Plaquemine to where my car was parked, and I thanked him profusely for potentially saving my life. I offered him some gas money, but he told me no, that there was no way he was about to take money off of me for just doing the right thing. That's something I never forgot about Louisiana, just how kind and generous people could be. How the whole thing about Southern hospitality was very, very true. But I've also never forgotten about that man in the bone mask. The man who haunted my nightmares for months after, and almost ruined my whole time at college since, like I said, I had to put my studies on pause just to get over what I'd seen out there. So please, don't ever go walking into the bayous of Louisiana alone, because there are people out there that are seriously averse to the intrusion of outsiders.
It all happened when I was babysitting for this family in my town. Their daughters were 6 and 10. I was 16 back then. I ordered the pizza, and we all ate that, and then went on to play video games for the next hour or so, until Mabel, the young daughter, wanted to sleep. Mabel slept, and Violet, who was the older one, discussed the idea of watching Nightmare on Elm Street. Now, I don't know if her parents would have allowed that. I even wondered why they even hired a babysitter, since Violet was pretty responsible herself. But the matter of fact, I agreed to watch the Nightmare at Elm Street. Did not want to look like an uptight dude. So we started watching it, and I brought in popcorn. She was pretty terrified, and we were sharing the blanket on our feet, quietly enjoying the movie. At around midway in the movie, we started hearing rustling noises on the outside. At first, I thought maybe their parents were home, so I told her to switch to The Princess Bride so I don't get scolded for showing a horror flick. As I got, there was nothing. I got back inside and she was on the phone. It was her parents. They said they'd be late. The roads have been blocked and there is a rumor that the power will go shortly. They ordered me to go back and instructed the daughter to shut the doors and sleep. She told me that I just couldn't shake the feeling of leaving both of them alone. So I stayed with them, just to make sure. We stood there talking about things. She was smarter than her age, and she asked me all the questions about school and stuff, and we ended up doing her homework. And the power just went off cold, but we were ready. I told her to go to her sister, and she did. I stood down and locked all the doors and windows. It felt like a storm would build up. I went up and informed her about everything. 3 of us gathered around the TV, so it could be easier in case we had to make a run for things or cover. We got together to talk about things while Mabel slept. It was like one of those slumber parties that we had as a kid, and we chatted a lot, until the room started shaking. It felt like it was an earthquake. I quickly made Rabel and Violet go take a cover and did it myself. I rolled on the flashlight to them and told them to make way for the door outside. Before all the shaking, they made their way to the door and we stepped outside. It was just the 3 of us and a couple more people since everybody was already out of town due to vacations. And as we stepped outside, we turned on the flashlights. Violet was holding me tightly, and I was carrying Mabel as she closed her eyes. Violet closed her eyes all the time too. And in a few minutes, a stream of lights made the night sky bright. And as it happened, I told Violet to open her eyes. It was beautiful. It seemed like a big, flat, square disc making its way to the sky. It was flying way closer than most flying vehicles, as an airplane or gliders or helicopters did. I and Violet and Mabel kept looking at it, mesmerized. The sky was all red, and soon, as we were in awe, we were terrified. As it rained fire from the rear of that unidentified object, almost as if it was crashing, I held the girls with all my grip strength, and we ran towards the house and took cover. We huddled together beneath the table, wrapping ourselves with Mabel's blanket. After an hour later, we went outside. The smoke from that flying object withered the whole city invisible, and the redness of its light was still there. Our town looked exactly like that upside down from Stranger Things. This was the memory that Stranger Things brought for me. Mabel and Violet's parents were very grateful, and I did not leave as they arrived at around 8 in the morning. The UFO was a government spacecraft mission that failed and crashed at an abandoned site not far from our town. I shortly moved to New York that next summer. Moving forward to 10 years, I was 26 and out on a date. My date came in and introduced herself. We lived in a small town. It was Violet. She was 20 and was studying at NYU. We started dating, and the first thing we discussed was the night that it all happened. We have been married for 4 years now, and it all came back to us when we binge-watched the Stranger Things, almost as if it had a part of our life somewhere in it.
I practice Taekwondo in a stadium in my city. It's a dangerous place, but I have been living all my life there and nothing has happened to me, so normally I forget about the robs and drugs and all of that. One day I was chatting with a friend in the entrance of the stadium and there was a guy shirtless and with a lot of muscles. He was just standing in front of a wall reading something, so none of us care about him. Some minutes later we say goodbye and leave to different places. I decide to walk to my house. I live about 30 to 40 minutes away. Because I had time and was a nice day, so while I was walking, I saw the same guy from before. He was walking in the street and fighting with the drivers. All I thought was that he was on some drugs and just kept walking. About 10 minutes later, he disappeared. Some minutes passed and nothing happened. I was just listening to music and walking. But 20 minutes later, or more or less, the guy passed me. I was kind of shocked because he appeared from nowhere. but he passed me, so I thought I was being way too paranoid. Then he stands in the same cross I was, and he watched me. I felt weird and texted my mom that I was close to home and asked her to open the door. It's important to describe my house for this. I live in a 3rd floor, but it's not a normal building. There are houses in the ground level, with 2nd floor backyard and everything. In between 2 houses, there is a stair that lets you in the 3rd floor. There are more houses over the ones on the ground level, and I live on the 3rd. So when I get to the stairs, the door was open and my dog was waiting for me. So I sit on the floor and pet her. Then my mom was like, "Be careful, there's someone behind you. Move so he can pass." I reply with an okay, stand up and went to the stairs without looking back. We started walking to my door. I went inside my house and looked back, and there he was. The shirtless guy was behind me all along, and he just was standing outside of my house. My mom closed the door and freaked out. She asked me if I knew him, if he had talked to me or something. I looked at her confused, still shocked. She started calling my dad, loud enough so the guy outside could hear it. My dad didn't hear her, but that was enough. The guy finally left. This happened some months ago, but it still freaks me out. He saw me, and he followed me, and now he knows where I live.
I live here in New Zealand, and late in 2018, I was feeling sort of lonely, so I decided to download the dating app Tinder to try and find myself a nice guy to go on a few dates with. Maybe even find myself a long-term boyfriend out of it. I ended up matching with this guy who'd come over from Australia, and we chatted for 2 weeks before we finally met up. The conversation was quite light, nothing too heavy, and it was fun. Like I said, it was from Australia. So we talked about Aussie things, and I remember telling him how much I wanted to visit Melbourne. He said that he'd been there once or twice and started making recommendations for some great coffee shops that he knew of. He seemed like a nice, normal guy, and when we agreed to meet, I was happy to do that. But then maybe 5 days or so before we were due to meet, he got really persistent and impatient. He would text me multiple times in a day, and if I didn't reply straight away, he would ask if something was wrong. I thought it was weird that he was being so clingy after starting off so confident. He kept trying to bring the date forward, so we could meet up sooner and would totally forget. If I had told him I was busy on a particular day, almost like he wasn't paying attention or didn't care about what I had to say. It was honestly really unusual for someone to be that persistent with me. I dated guys before who were maybe a bit persistent, but only have a nervous excitement. Different kind of excitement than this awesome guy seemed to be. I just couldn't understand why it was that he could not possibly wait until the Sunday that we'd arranged to meet. It felt very narcissistic, and I should have seen it as the red flag that it was and not just meet up with him at all. I had the messages saved on my phone for a while, so I had a record of the exact dates and times that he sent some of the messages. So on the 2nd of December, he messaged me just after 9 a.m. saying, "Good morning, how are you?" And again about an hour and a half later. I didn't reply to the first message because I was asleep, but I think he took it the wrong way because he said it was fine if I changed my mind and didn't feel like going on the date. That was when I messaged him back and confirmed that I would meet him later on that day. We met up and went to a place called Revelry. It's a very standard bar, very popular, and lots of people go there, but it's definitely more of a nighttime bar. I had never drunk there during the afternoon or the daytime, but it was open, seemed like it had a chill atmosphere, and he wanted to go there, so that's where we went. He was a bit bigger than the pictures on his Tinder profile showed, and it was obvious that he had put on a little bit of weight. He had big distinctive eyes, and he was very, very clean cut. I mean, like his clothes looked freshly washed and ironed. He was also very well groomed, obviously took good care of his skin and stuff like that. Like he was really good looking. I remember asking him a lot of different questions, and he just sort of talked to me. He tried to ask me a few questions, but they weren't very in-depth ones. I thought he was a bit nervous, to be honest, but that's not unusual for a first date. But things start to sort of unravel at one point, because he had said one thing in messages about where he worked and a different thing on the date. I started to feel a bit uneasy, like I wanted to trust him, but as soon as he started to put on some inconsistencies, I began to wonder if he was just lying about stuff to impress me, because he was from Australia. I asked him the whereabouts that he had met his Kiwi friends, and he told me that all his friends were police officers or somehow involved in law enforcement. He said how he had met with them while out drinking in various bars, how they gotten to know each other over time, and they regularly invite him back to their places over barbecues and stuff like that. He also mentioned that his best friend from Australia was coming over to be a Crown Court prosecutor. That's why I noticed that a lot of the stuff that he was talking about kind of had this running theme to it. It kind of seemed like he was obsessed with that sort of thing, which in hindsight explains an awful lot. I think he was sort of trying to process some of the things that he had been up to over the previous few days, and it came out in his conversation style. He obviously thought an awful lot about policemen, dead bodies, and ways people can be killed, prosecution justice in the court system, and it just came out in a very strange way like that on our first date. Like I said before, we talked quite a lot about him being friends with lots of different policemen, and he went into quite a bit of depth regarding the details of certain investigations that they apparently shared with him. He said that we're having a really tough time around the time because of bodies going missing in the White Toggy Ranges. He told me that police corpse sniffing dogs can only detect decaying flesh about 4 feet deep under the soil, so if the bodies are buried in a deeper than that, the police won't be able to find them. I thought it was a bit of a morbid thing to talk about on the first date, but it was an interesting fact nonetheless. He also got into a conversation about all the different kinds of poisonous snakes in Australia, and he became quite animated about it. He obviously had a passion for the natural world. It was quite out there, but I thought it was cute. I love animals too, so I was glad we had something in common and made me feel a bit more relaxed again. But then, right as I started feeling comfortable with him again, he started telling me this really bizarre and creepy story. He told me how crazy it is that a guy can make one little mistake and then go to jail for the rest of his life for it. He went on to tell me about this guy he knew back in Oz who had consensual intimacy involving choking with his girlfriend, then that ended up accidentally killing her in the process. He assured me that the whole thing was a horrible, tragic accident, how things just went wrong suddenly, and how the guy was really upset because he loved her and would never hurt her on purpose. But still, the guy got done for manslaughter and was sent to prison for a long, long time. What I know now is this could have been him testing on his story on me when he was able to see that I was a bit uncomfortable with what he was saying. He tried to change the subject, so we could talk about more mundane things. I didn't try to make a swift exit or anything. I'm quite used to dealing with all sorts of people. And I'm not saying people who talk about dark things on the first date are like bad people or anything, but it was definitely weird. We hung out for a while, but after about 3 hours or so, I made some excuses as to why I had to leave, and we said goodbye. As we were parting ways, he said, "My car is this way," and pointed off down a particular road. My car was down the same road. But at that stage, I was feeling uneasy and my instincts had just kicked in telling me to walk a different way. He was also a lot bigger than me, so if something went wrong, I knew I wouldn't be able to defend myself. In hindsight, it was a good decision. It was my intuition sense. My brain was saying this was strange. That was strange. And looking back on it now, it is really strange to think of who he actually was. I don't think it is the realm of what normal human brains can comprehend. But just the day before we met up, the guy was out on that first date with had murdered a girl in his hotel room, a British girl called Grace McLean. The reason he had brought up his friend accidentally strangling his girlfriend is because that's exactly how he'd killed her. Although whether or not he was on purpose is another question entirely. Also, the reason he had mentioned the whole Toggery mountain range is because that's where he ended up disposing of her body. And all that other stuff about sniffer dogs was research that he'd been doing the previous night that was still sort of consuming his mind. It is hard to look back and think that that had just happened to her. From what I understand, while we were on our date, her body was still in that hotel room of his, hidden under the bed or something, wrapped in a blanket. There's nothing I could have done. And I know that now. but it is still really hard to come to terms with that. I do think if it had been a date in the evening, potentially, I could have been a victim. I take a lot of solace in the fact that I do have my wits about me and do take safety in online dating quite seriously, and that is nothing against any women who are willing to go home with someone on the first date. But I do want to say to young women who take one more step in your thinking when you're on a date to see how well you know this person actually. Since then, I have been on dates with lovely, trustworthy men, but think how well do I really know them? It has made me go a little slower and divulge a little less personal information to them. I know in modern dating, it is quite common to give people your Instagram handle, but you aren't giving people access to a lot of personal information. It is really dangerous. And I just want to encourage people to take a step back and think before they do that. There's nothing wrong with taking a step back, taking it slow and pacing yourself a bit. Alcohol has a big effect. It is part of the social fabric of dating and part of life these days, but it still comes with a massive risk. Women need to be really aware of how much they are drinking on dates, and unfortunately, drinks are sometimes spiked. We live in this world where people are still idealistic about how things should be on dates, but incidents like these take things back 10 or 20 years, or women are still having to grip their keys between their fingers, or can't leave a drink on the table. We aren't as developed as we think we are in areas such as dating. Technology has gotten ahead of us. I think people are as they always are. I think with the advancement of technology, we thought we would become more refined, but we are just the same, but with new technology. I think the invention of dating apps is a wonderful thing, and I wouldn't want to live in a world without that. But I just wished for a world where women don't have to think about their safety all the time.